All right, everyone, welcome back. We are COMP229, that's Web Application Development in the summer 2022 semester at Centennial, and it's week 3 of our broadcast and recording. And I'm going to go over some stuff today about Express. There's a lot of new material here for you, but we'll talk about what to do, how to conquer it, and how to be successful with this next set of material. So last week what we did was talk about the mean stack a little bit. We also said that it's not just about mean anymore. It's also about MERN, right? Which is the Mongo Express React and Node. Again, next week we're going to be starting Mongo. And we did an intro to Node.js. We did a little server. We used a couple of package managers last week, NPM and Yarn. Those are the two things we used. I also talked about package.json and the difference between project dependencies and developer dependencies. There's a big difference between those two things. We also did more work with Nodemon. We talked about how Node.js is an event-driven web development environment. I also talked about the difference between common JS modules as well as Ecmascript modules, which are different. We talked two different things. We said from a core modules perspective, so these are built-in modules for Node.js. I introduced HTTP and file system, the file system module. Those are the two that we use primarily. And we also made sure that your Visual Studio Code extensions were pretty good. For the most part, I think across two different sections, you guys are pretty good on that. All right, so that's what we did last week. We're sitting this week at week 3, but one of the things that's kind of hot, that's boiling for you guys to get done is your Express portfolio. So right now, again, this first part is individual, like we talked about before, and it was released week 2, so that's last week. It's due next week, week 4, your Express portfolio site. And so the expectation is, if you watch the video for the Express portfolio site, the assignment 1 video, please do, because that goes through all the details, things that I'm looking for from you. There's a lot of details here about what is going to be happening, and the thing that I've talked about here in the video before is that you need to use the Express generator for your site. Okay, we haven't covered it together like live, but it is covered on the course shell, which I will talk about in a second. Again, we're sitting at week 3. This week we had Victoria Day, so it's a shortened week. We didn't have class on Monday for section 2. But we do have a class for you guys today on Wednesday, and I will be recording, which is what I'm doing right now, the video for you guys. So again, this is Express, the Express generator, how to make an Express site, as well as deploying to Heroku. Like, there are a ton of videos for you to watch for this week. In fact, I would say most likely the load when it comes to homework and the stuff that you have to do from this week on becomes a lot greater. This week, guys, just like last week, is a critical week because from an understanding perspective, there's just no way that like I said earlier, that I can possibly teach all the stuff that I have to do for you in 1 2-hour session. And I kind of point you again back to your course shell for week 3. Notice here that there's some background for Express and so on, and a series of videos that you need to watch. You need to watch these things. This is not an optional thing. It's required watching. This is like reading your textbook. If you don't do this, you will not be successful with your Express portfolio site. You need to watch this stuff. Everything, and including Express and Heroku, which is probably somewhat changed now, which is something that's happening with Heroku. Heroku requires a little bit more security, so please follow the tutorials related to Heroku. So again, take a look at this. There's half an hour here, together, another 40 minutes there, so it's an hour and 42 minutes, and there's, let's say, another 20 minutes approximately. So there's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours, right? So we're talking almost 3 hours of video that I've recorded for you here, and you need to go through it. And some of this is going to take you longer than these times because when you watch a video, I might be going pretty fast in the video. You need to slow me down, or maybe I'm going slow, maybe you need to speed me up, whatever you need to do, but you need to get this done. I cannot impart to you the importance of going through the videos that I've posted up on eCentennial for you. However, we're not going to just leave those to what you're doing. We're also going to add more. And for this, I'm going to go to the desktop Centennial. We're going to start right away with your COMP229 M2022. And you guys are section 1. And inside there, I have 2 lessons, lesson 1 and lesson 2. And what I'm going to do just before we start is take lesson 2 and duplicate it. So Control C, Control V, right, which duplicates the lesson and makes lesson 3, which is something that we're going to handle today. Now, there's a lot we're going to change here, but what I'm going to start with is Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code for you, and I'm going to drag and drop lesson 3 in there right away. So let's get moving with that. So lesson 3 and lesson 2 are identical right now because they just have the same structure. We also have a server.js that looks like this. This is the old server that we worked with last week. And remember what we did, this is just a review for what we did last week. We used Nodemon, so I kind of did a control backtick. Again, this is the exact same copy of lesson 2 from last week. I'm just going to use Nodemon here. So let's just do one of these. And I'll do Nodemon. Well, if I can type Nodemon. And when I do Nodemon, it's going to bring up my port 3000, just like normal. And then I need to use a browser, which I'm going to put up. So localhost 3000. And you can see we did hello world. And if I do Control-Shift-J, you can see that I'm going to have a resource here like this. Notice it also failed to load resource status of 404 for my favicon. And that's okay, but what we did was we read a JSON file last week from our code. So that's kind of what we did with section 2. It doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, this is what we kind of had built using just our Node.js, which is pretty cool. However, we're going to go more into it this week, and we're going to talk about a couple things. One, I also loaded last week a third-party middleware. We'll talk about what middleware is really quickly this week. It kind of talks about it in the course shell, but I want to go over it with you a little bit more because people have a misunderstanding of what middleware is. I'll talk about that today. I will restructure this thing to make it an Express server, and then quickly, if we have time, I'm going to use the Express generator and restructure our site to use that. Also, one thing to note is you guys are still using JavaScript, and that's a server.js. We want to move eventually. We need to move to TypeScript, and I haven't had a chance to do it with you because I've been doing some examples here with JavaScript just to get you guys going. But we need to move away from that as fast as possible. Again, this is where I will need more time today compared to normal. All right, so that's just something that we're doing. So I'm mentioning this because we're sitting at week 3 and lots of stuff to do. It's very little time to do it. And so let's talk about the stuff that I want to, that we're supposed to talk about this week. So again, installing Express, how do you do it? Organizing your project structure, we'll talk about that. Configuring your Express application, using the Express routing mechanism, how to do that. Rendering EJS views, what is that? Serving static files, we kind of did that with Node.js. We're going to show you how to do that with Express. Configuring an Express session, all this stuff and more is what we cover this week. Part of it is in the course shell. I can't possibly cover all of it, like I said, in live session, but the other part is in our live session. So again, Express, it was created by TJ Alowichuk, which he was very amazing developer. Again, he kind of based Express, this is again the Express framework. He based it on top of Node.js and something called CommonJS or Connect, and so it's based on Connect. This is the background for it, right? And what he did, he extended Connect, this other framework, this other thing that he built, in order for him to make Express. And so far, what we've had is a single server.js, and sometimes, depending on the class I'm teaching, server.ts. TS is the TypeScript stuff that I want to get you guys to, hopefully today. And what we need to do today is install Express, so it looks something like this, okay? But before we get there, what we want to do is talk a little bit about some technologies. So first, let's go to the Express website. So in the Express website, you see it looks like this. I'm just going to pull this up here for you guys. So this is the stuff we're going to. I'll also put this in the YouTube chat as well for those people who are going to follow along. Notice that it's 4.18.0. My PowerPoint slides are showing 4.17.3, and that was just done this last semester. So the thing to note is that Express, just like any other web technologies, moves quickly in terms of development and improvement. Okay, so that is, you know, pretty good in terms of what it is. So when we install Express, we do use npm like before. That's what we do. And Express, think about it, is like a layer on top of Node.js. That's what it is. And so far, what we've been doing with our Node.js application, right? If we look back at our, again, all I've done for those people just coming in is I've copied in our structure, I've copied week 3 or lesson 3 if you're watching and you are section 2. Let's say you're a section 2 person. And normally I call them week 3, but for section 1, I call it lesson 3 just to keep them separately. Doesn't matter if you're section 1 or section 2. I've made a copy of the second week and made it here, and then dragged and dropped it into Visual Studio Code. So here on the left, you can see that I have my package.json. And last week we had, you know, the name of my package.json was COMP229, M2022, and lesson 2. We're going to change that to lesson 3, obviously, or week 3 if you're a section 2 person. And here again, that'll be lesson 3. So we're just renaming some stuff in package.json. That's the only thing we're going to do. And we're going to put this up on GitHub. So because lesson 1, 2, and 3 are all part of the same GitHub repository, all I need to do then is go here, and I'm just going to say git commit -m, and I'll say something like added project files for lesson 3. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to push that one up on GitHub. So these are the same commands, nothing different here. I've just tried to update this so you know where we're at with our lesson. And for our GitHub repository, right, if we look online, you're going to see that the GitHub repository that I'm updating and I'm referring to is this one. So this is the GitHub repository that I'm using for today's lesson. Okay, so this is the one. I'm also going to push that on YouTube, so whoever's watching can have both of those 2 links to follow along. All right, so this is the repository. You can clearly see what I've done is I've added lesson 3 to the repository, and this is, you know, kind of the flow that we're moving through. I see that we have more people now. Thank you for joining. And this is great, but what we've been doing so far, and this is the new stuff that I was talking about, what I will be working with for the remainder of semester, we've been using server.js. And I want to point you now to a piece of technology we need to know about if we're going to move into front-end technologies, which is TypeScript, right? Please go to typescriptlang.org. Typescriptlang.org is the link. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And normally what I would do is introduce TypeScript later on in the second half of semester, but typically what I found is introducing it earlier rather than later, get you guys working with it and more comfortable with working with TypeScript from the very beginning. All right, so what the heck is TypeScript? Why do we need it? And why am I even talking about it in Node.js? Well, if you look at, so if we go, please go with me to typescriptlang.org and go to Playground, please, really quickly. So on Playground, you're going to see a couple of things here. You're going to have 2 screens. On the left-hand side is your TypeScript. On the right-hand side is your JavaScript. So what TypeScript needs to do, because TypeScript is not acceptable by browsers directly, we need to do something called transpiling, or compiling, basically, transcompiling from TypeScript over to JavaScript. That's what we do. And again, you're going to ask me, well, why do we care about this, Tom? Why do we even care about JavaScript or TypeScript at all? Because TypeScript makes our lives easier, especially for Node.js and Express on the back end. So far, when we look at our project, right, in Visual Studio Code, you get some code hinting, and it's okay, all right? Because Visual Studio Code is pretty awesome. But we can get additional code hinting, especially for Node.js on the back end and Express and other applications that we may not get the same support from our editor by using Visual Studio Code with TypeScript. Okay, so let's see how that works and what that TypeScript is. So typically when I do an intro to TypeScript, I make a class, all right, like on the left-hand side here. Notice that there is a version for the TypeScript that we have. Okay, so remember I asked you to download and install TypeScript from the very first day. That was one of the installation requirements of this course, right? So if I go here to my terminal again, this is for you to test. This is for you to test, and if I type in tsc -- version, you should see something like 4.6.4, which is exactly what I asked you guys to download and install last time for NPM. So that means that we are on the same page with our TypeScript people online, or the latest version is what we have, right? We didn't have to download anything from here. We downloaded it through Yarn and NPM. That's what we did. So what I want you to do now is on the left, so again, we're in Playground, right? On the left in Playground in TypeScriptLang.org, I want you to remove everything. So everything's gone. Okay, so you can see here, right side is JavaScript, left side is TypeScript. And on the left, there is something called a tsconfig. Okay, we want to kind of expand this piece right here. And you can see this is a configuration for the server that we're going to transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. That's what we're going to do. So you can see the language is TypeScript. The target is the language we're going to convert to. And it says Ecmascript 2017. What we want instead of Ecmascript 2017 is the latest, right? So something like ES 2022 is fine. I would recommend something like this, okay? For JSX, because we're not using React right now, we can change this from React to none. This may restart your TypeScript, which it did. So again, back to tsconfig. This is on the site, okay? This is just to give you an example. So I have TypeScript. Make sure that this says ES 2022. You can see that that got reset. Module pattern is which one. You want to use ES 2022 for module pattern, right? This is what it's going to look like. On the left, down here, you're going to see that there are a number of different options that we're going to select. And these options we're going to use locally in our file system in a few minutes. So it says output formatting, preserve watch output, disable wiping the console in watch mode, pretty, enable color and formatting in TypeScript's output to make compiler errors easier to read. Okay, I mean, sure, we can put that on. No error truncation, okay, and that's not really important, but you can see that here, that's output formatting. So these are different sections that we're going to have in our configuration files locally, and this is just an example online of how TypeScript can be configured. TypeScript is already installed on your system because I asked you guys to do that. Now it's just a matter of configuration and use. So emit. Emit means when we have TypeScript, we need to convert it to JavaScript somehow. And remember, we talked about us having to transpile. We have to make some way of transpiling it from JavaScript to TypeScript, or from TypeScript to JavaScript, so that our browser and our Node.js can understand it. If we don't do that, both parts are not going to understand anything that we're doing because TypeScript is not native to the browser and it's not native to Node.js, not yet, okay? One day, I think most of what TypeScript is there for, and I'm just going to tell you the history, a little brief history of TypeScript. TypeScript was created by Google and Microsoft specifically to support Angular. Okay, that's what it was for. Why? Because Angular was hard to wrangle, to master with just JavaScript, and it was a little bit less structured JavaScript, and then they needed something like type support. So Microsoft created something like this. This is well supported, and it's an active project that is very, very popular. So TypeScript is valuable for sure. And all we want to do is make our lives easier. We want to get more tooling, more type support for as we're programming. We want to get more code hinting too, and errors. We want errors to come up because if we don't get errors, the biggest problem with JavaScript in general is it doesn't complain enough. Right? It doesn't complain enough. So we want it to complain, and the way we can get TypeScript and JavaScript to complain is to install TypeScript. That's how we're going to do it. So, okay, so emit. we want to remove comments. I like that. Let's remove comments, because when we go from TypeScript with full comments from us, from a developer, on the JavaScript side, we want it to have no comments. We don't care about comments on the JavaScript side. We only care it on the TypeScript side. Let's keep going. There's others inside here. Inline source maps for emitted JavaScript. You can see that there are a number of different optional values here. ES module interrupt. We definitely need to use this, right, for what we're doing. Okay. Type checking, strict. I like this. No implicit any means that you cannot have a variable that has no type declared for it. We're going to talk about that. Strict null checks. I like that. Strict functional types. Strict bind call apply. So this is really nice. Strict property initialization. No implicit this. So these are all strict values that we're going to use when we code, so that TypeScript is going to complain if we don't do things the right way. Okay. Always strict. You can see that there's a lot of little options here as well, and we can click some of them and uncheck other ones. Experimental decorators, definitely, I like that. Emit decorator metadata, for sure. And you can see that there are several additional options. Okay, so that's what tsconfig is. Tsconfig, and I really haven't changed anything except for maybe making it prettier right now. And this, the language TypeScript and the target ES2022, and the module pattern ES2022, right? Those are the things I've done. And I want to show you the difference when we do this thing. So I'm going to close this now. And on the left, let's make a simple class, like a person class. And let's see how it looks. So if you're programming from C#, a class might look like this. Class, right? And you can see that we're going to have the class called person, right? So this is the person class. And in the person class, we might declare something like a name and an age. So we might have something like a name, right? Which we can declare. Colon means, we talked about this last week, colon means type of, right? Or type. And, well, it's a string, right? That's what it is. So name is a string. We might also have age, which maybe we'll make age a number. All right, we can do that. And then we might have a constructor function. So these are like private instance members. Private instance members. We could also, in JavaScript or in TypeScript, have getters and setters. So we can do something like, I can have a get, kind of thing. If I type get, and notice what if I want to make a getter, right, then what it's going to be looking like is, by the way, if you don't know how to code in TypeScript, or if you ever want hints before we move on, you can always see the handbook. Let's just open that up in a new browser window. So the handbook is really, really awesome, because in TypeScript, this is the best documentation for TypeScript, by the way. If you go up to the handbook, right, and if you look here, and if I wanted to look down into classes on the left-hand side, right, you can see that it talks about how to write a class. It gives you hints on how to do everything here, as well as, if I scroll down, it talks about how to make things read-only, how you do constructors, how methods look, what they look like, and so on, and getters and setters. You can see that I'm going to use a getter and setter that looks like this, right? And this is very, very similar to what Java looks like, or C++, right? So that's what it kind of looks like there. So I want to do this with my getter and setter. Let's try that out. So again, what I want to do is go back to here, and I want to say something like get, and I want to make a friendly name for the getter. So that is capital N for name, right? That's typically what I do, right? And just like the handbook tells us, if you look to the handbook, notice that when we get something, we need a return type, right? So let's do that. So get name, and then it's going to look like this, right? Because name, if you think about it, name is actually or a getter is just a method. That's what it is, right? So we need to finish it off like any other method. So it needs to look like a method. There's our getter. And our getter is going to return name, right? And we want to put this dot name because, again, we want to refer to this object right here. Okay, so that object right there is the name. name, when we do a get, that's how it looks like. So these are getters and setters. Getters and setters. We can also look at them as properties, public properties. Okay, which you might have learned about in C++, C++ or in C# or Java or anything else. They're very similar to this. Okay, so that's getter. Let's do a setter. And set name, we might have a value, like for example, name, which will be a string type. And when we pass in the value for name, we want to set it, our name up. So we can say this dot name is equal to name, name being the parameter type. This is the parameter, see that? And this is the property up here. This is the private instance member or private property. Sometimes we call them that. In fact, we want to use private in our TypeScript because we can actually use private or accessor access modifiers like private, public, and protected in TypeScript, where you couldn't really do that in JavaScript. So this is kind of what TypeScript might look like. Here's the JavaScript version. But remember, the JavaScript version that we're looking at is Ecmascript 2022, the latest version of Ecmascript or JavaScript. If I wanted to see what this would look like in an earlier version, for example, using something like an IFI to make a class, which you guys should have learned about in COMP229, then I can go back to tsconfig and I can change the module, the target type from ES2022 to Ecmascript 5. Let's try that. If I did Ecmascript 5 and close it, you can clearly see that this is the old way of how classes were done before Ecmascript 6. All right, this is what classes look like. And look, there's our little IFI. That's what the IFI would look like. That's what IFIs were used for, as a closure to make classes, right? So you can clearly see at the time when this was made earlier that TypeScript was superior because we didn't even have this class structure that would work properly. Something that looked like this over here. So let's continue with this structure. And here again, all I've changed to make this look like this is in tsconfig, I've changed the target to ES5. Okay. We'll work with that. Let's keep it like this and continue. All right, so let's say we want to do the constructor. So these are getters and setters. That's private instance members. This is the constructor. And in the constructor, we use the word constructor. And we take in, maybe we want our constructor to take in those two values. So initialize our name and age. We haven't made the getter and setter for age yet, but we will. And the way it would be is we want our name to be a string and we want age to be a number. Okay, so that's how it looks like. All right, so there's our constructor function. Now there's complaints here. See these little underlines here? It says that age is declared by never read, and name is declared by never read. And also there's another issue. It said that there's no initializer and it's not definitely assigned in the constructor. All right, so it's not assigned and no initializer here. What it's looking for is for me to do something like this dot name is equal to name, and this dot age is equal to age. Okay, that's what it's looking for me to take that error away, because it says, hey, you need to initialize it here in the constructor. If you don't do it in the constructor, there's an issue. Okay, and let's continue. Let's say private age. Let's do the getter and setter for age. So again, we'll say get age. Again, I'm using caps for this, and where I can return this dot age, and I can also set age, where we have an age, which is a number, right? And I can say this dot age is equal to age, right? Which is a very common pattern. Again, take a look at this. So if I go from this to this, you can clearly see that this is way more desirable than something like this, Ecmascript 5. And this is the reason where we went to this. TypeScript was used back when we first started programming the mean stack in 2015, because we didn't have great support from JavaScript. It just didn't exist. Now let's go back to what it would look like today. All right, this is what it looked like back in the day. By the way, Node.js was the same thing. It didn't have support for TypeScript at all until recently, right? And if I go back to tsconfig and change my target from ES5 to ES2022, the latest version, you can clearly see now that it's very similar. But there's still stuff that's missing. I still can't declare access types like private or public or protected. I can't do that. That's not something that exists in today's JavaScript. It doesn't exist. All right. But what does exist is getters and setters. That is something that's there. It's something that we can do now. Okay. Constructor also exists, but notice that when we assign it, this is the rule in JavaScript. If we assign it, well, then we create it. Okay, so here we had to create it first, declare it first, and then in the constructor function, just like any other language, then we can use it after we've declared it. We declared it here, we use it down here, but not so in JavaScript. In JavaScript, if I use it, so if I assign something to it, then I create it, which is something a little different in JavaScript. And this is pretty much the rule with JavaScript in general. But TypeScript doesn't like this. TypeScript at least needs to know that you've actually done some initialization first before you use it, which is pretty cool. Let's add a method. Methods in TypeScript and in look a little different in classes. They kind of look like this. We don't use the function keyword. We just use the name of the method. So for example, something like says hello. Okay, there's our says hello method. And what does this says hello method do? We also can declare the type that it returns. So says hello can be something like returning void. We can do that. And in fact, we can also do return types for our getter. Our getter, well, that returns a string clearly. And so does our age. However, our, actually that's number, isn't it? Look at that. Look how TypeScript helped me there. So that because age is a number, it said that there was a type mismatch, right? So that's where TypeScript really, really helps compared to if I was going to do this on my own, like I was just doing. So you can see that this is just helpful. It's helpful for us to see the type that it returns. Notice I don't have to do the same thing for name, because name, when I set name is a string type. I can't do a return type for name. If I did something like returns void, a lot of times what that does, it makes it complain. Okay, you can't do that for a set accessor, all right? So you don't need to do this, but that's how it looks. Again, there's not much difference here. You can see this says hello down in here. And how does says hello work? Well, we can do a console log. And we can use a template string. We talked about template strings last week, where we use a backtick character. This is kind of a little bit of review. Backtick character, and we can do something like the name of the person. So this dot name. Or we can actually say this dot name, like capital N, if we want to, says hello. Right? So that is a very standard class that we can make. Notice that it does the exact same thing because this is the latest version of JavaScript. So it also has template strings. But in the past, if I was to go back and change this to Ecmascript 5, you can clearly see, well, it concatenates. That's what it does. It concatenates, the name with says hello. That's the way it would do that. We also, for the old way of doing JavaScript, it uses a prototype, kind of keyword, because remember that the type of classes that we make with JavaScript is not classical inheritance, but rather it uses something called prototypal inheritance, prototypes. Okay, so even though it looks beautiful on this side, and even if I convert it to Ecmascript 2022, in your mind as developers, you need to remember that when we use classes in JavaScript or in TypeScript, that they are not classical inheritance. They're not classical classes. They're using something called prototypal inheritance or prototypes, okay? Even in the background. So it doesn't matter what it looks like here. We use prototypes, all right, for JavaScript. So why am I showing you this? Because I'm giving you justification for TypeScript. I'm showing you that on the left, I'm getting some great code hinting. Here, none, right? And what's going to happen is typically if you were going to put this in an app.js file or whatever, unless you use Visual Studio Code, luckily we are, then the errors that we might get are minimal. Here's something that's not covered by JavaScript today. This is the latest version of JavaScript. I want to create a module, all right? So typically what we do if I want to share across files, I want to do a module like this or a namespace. Let's make this a namespace. Namespace, okay? This is kind of something that you might be familiar with if you're a C# developer or even a C++ developer or a Java developer. We use packages. But at the end of the day, you make a namespace. For example, something like core, right? So if I take that namespace core and I want to have person be inside of my namespace or my module, namespace, module, same thing, right? Then I can kind of grab all this, cut it, and put it inside of my namespace. Okay, now what does it do? What does this do, guys? What is this thing that it does when we convert? What is it? Tell me. What does it look like for you? Anybody? Let's see, guys, if you guys are alive and awake out there. Are you guys alive and awake? What was that? It's an iffy. That's right. It's an iffy. You got it, Said. So it's exactly what I was showing you in the very first day we got together. It's an iffy. This is how they do their namespaces. Even now, this is the only way they can do it, right? So there is no such thing as a namespace. However, one thing to note is when I put something like a class inside of a namespace, it's inaccessible, right? Which means it's kind of like hidden or private, right? So to make a class inside of a namespace public, we need to use the export keyword. So we use export, and when I do this, what export does is it makes the class person accessible. Even today, this is what it would look like. Guys, this is unacceptable when it comes to the way it's done. You can see that this function core stuff and the iffy pattern is something that is less palatable for the average developer compared to something that looks like this. So still, TypeScript has some uses, as well as there's a lot of other functionality that TypeScript includes, right? Compared to what regular JavaScript does. Here's an example. What if I had an enum, right? Where I had different types of people. So let's say I made an enum with people types, all right? So I called it people types, right? Here's my enum. A typical enum might look like this, right? A student, right? A teacher, I don't know, other kinds of peoples that they're out there. I don't know, some kind of worker or a scientist and so on. Okay, so this is what an enum might look like in regular languages, but when we convert it to JavaScript, oh man, it looks like this, because there is no such thing as an enum in JavaScript. It does not exist. Okay. Yeah, var core. Var core, remember, this is something that's being converted, right? And this is the latest version of JavaScript, latest version, even though they still use var. Core is the core namespace. That's what it represents. It's a variable. And then what we do is we take that variable and we pass it into the iffy. That's what we're doing here, okay? Again, a little bit confusing. And same thing with this. This is definitely confusing. So people types might be the thing that I'm trying to make with the student. You can see if I hover over, student has 0, 1, 2, 3, just like we would in other languages. But here in JavaScript, nope. It has actually what we're making use of, what we're doing here is we're creating an associative array, guys. That's what we're doing, an associative array. And yes, it's equivalent to doing this, but so much more uglier to do it this way, okay, compared to doing it this way. There is no enum support in JavaScript, and there should be. It's just part of what we know how to program these days. Instead of making strings that look like this, which, are error prone, right? We literally can say something like people type student. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change my person from a only requiring two things, a name and an age. I could also require a people type, people's types, right? That's what I want to say. So I can have that in there. And I can say that the type, let's call this private type, which will be a people's types. See, I can do that with this thing here, right? Here, I got nothing, right, on this side. And here, if I said type, and you can see that type, it says type is declared, but it's never used. Property type has no initializer. We want to use this. So down in here where I go to this, my constructor is going to take the type, and I can say that the type is of type people types, and I can even initialize it with a value. For example, I can say my people types by default is people types dot, let's say, student, right? Let's say I make that a default. That's the default. You're a student as a people type, right? And then I can kind of assign it. I can say that this dot type is equal to type, and we're good to go, right? Just like we normally do. I can also assign the people types later by doing something else, but you can see what I'm doing here, okay? That, sure, I want to use this people types.student. This is the exact same thing, but to set up an enumeration is a pain in the ass. Sorry to say it that way, but that's just what it is. So for that reason and many other reasons, TypeScript is still amazing when it comes to code hinting and to give us some information about, or to set up things that we know how to do in other languages. If I want to make you into a JavaScript developer from a C# developer, it's blue because type is a reserved word. We should be using something like the people type. We should change this. By the way, if I want to refactor rename, I can just rename symbol here, and I can call this people type or person type, whatever I want. And then that would be not a bad thing. So people type, where I can say that this is people type, right? It's a reserved word, and it's asking us not to use type because type means something. Right now, it's this color. It says declared but never used. That's why it's gray, because I haven't used people type at all. I've just declared it here, right? This dot people type is equal to people type, but I've never really used it. And the way to use that would be if I had a getter and setter, which I can set up. So get, people type as an example, right? Which will return a people type, people types type. And I can say that I want to return this dot, people type, this one, right? So that is something that I can do. And once I've used it, even if it's a getter means that it's only a read-only. Now it becomes white again. So it's kind of a way of telling us what this means, if there's an issue or not. All right, that's enough. I've given you almost an hour of TypeScript. There's way more to learn with TypeScript. And the reason why I'm talking about it is going to make our life easier when it comes to Express and Node and everything else. Here's something we want to do now. I want to convert our server, right? I want to convert our server that we had from last week. I want to convert it to TypeScript. Okay, so I want to use, TypeScript. And the reason why I want to use TypeScript is because, again, it's going to give us better code hinting. And how will this look? What do we need to do to make this work, and so on? Well, one is, whenever we use TypeScript, we need something that we had over here. We had by default some kind of TS configuration file or a TypeScript configuration file. Let's put this inside of our real code. Now we're starting to code for real right now. Okay, guys, let's go into our Visual Studio Code. Questions so far about TypeScript? Are you still not sure what it is? Hopefully you guys all know what TypeScript is by now. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that layers over JavaScript. It's a separate language. And in order for us to get, JavaScript, which we want JavaScript at the end for it to work properly, we need to transpile. Exactly, Julian. It's a translator to make life easier for us, all right? So what we need here is a TypeScript config file. So inside of our lesson 3, I'm going to add in a brand new file. It's going to be a tsconfig.json file. Please do that with me. tsconfig.json, okay? Notice that it is red because it's not a proper configuration file yet. What we need to do when we start putting it in is we need to use curly braces to start off. So that's the first part. And the first part of any tsconfig.json file or TypeScript configuration file is the compiler options. So I'm going to go in that first. I'm going to say, if I press Control space, it's going to give me a list of options typically that it'll allow. And it might take a little bit of time, like it's showing you right here, right? But if I look at it, I want to go with compiler options. Take a look at compiler options. That's what I want first, okay? Now, if you don't get this, you can still type it in like this, okay? And compiler options are the things that we had before. Let's start with our target, okay? So the first thing we want is, what is our target? What do I want to convert to? I want to have TypeScript, which is awesome. It's beautiful. And I want to convert to JavaScript, right? What is the target that I'm converting to? What is my target going to look like? The JavaScript target. Well, let's type in target, and I want to put in, look what the options are. I want to use Ecmascript 2022. That is the target, just like we saw online. Next. the module pattern that I want to use. This is important. I want to use a common JS module pattern. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to start using right now. I'm just actually going to just check one more thing here, just to make sure my notes are correct, because I don't want to give you the wrong information here compared to what we have before. One sec. As I'm just going to move further into my notes here. And so that I'm not giving you the wrong thing. Yep, it's true. All right. So common JS is the module pattern. We want to make so that we want to also use source maps. So we're going to say source maps are true. Source maps gives the ability to troubleshoot TypeScript configuration files or TypeScript files natively, which is pretty cool. We want to use remove comments. This is kind of something we saw, which is true. We don't want to have comments in our emitted JavaScript. We also want to have strict, which is true. So we want to say that it's always strict. We have no implicit any's. So we don't want to allow an object not to be, TypeScript. Anything we declare in TypeScript, we want it to be declared as a type. That's what no implicit any means. We have to either say it's an any type, because any type, I'm going to type it inside the chat for you. So if the type is any, that is a type. So is, like we said before, string, right? Number, right? And other ones, undefined. That's an any, right? Or that's a type. There's a bunch of other ones, okay? But these are very common types: any, string, number, and other ones, right? So no implicit any means it's not going to assign the type any just to a variable that it doesn't understand what it means, because TypeScript is going to try and figure out what you want, okay? Next, strict null checks. Strict null checks. We want that to be true, right? We also want strict, notice if I start typing strict function types. We want that to be true. We also want strict property initialization to true, just like we showed you there. I want no implicit this. No implicit this means you must use the this keyword. That's going to be true, right? Always strict, right, is going to be true, as well as no implicit returns, right? So we're not going to just return, by default. We have to use the return keyword, because JavaScript allows you not to do it if you don't want to. We also, now this is the important part, ES module interop, which allows to use ES modules, Ecmascript module pattern, right? As well as emit decorator metadata. We want that to be true. As well as experimental decorators. We want that to be true. And finally, module resolution should be node. This one, okay? So this is the first piece. I'm going to copy paste it in a second, guys. Just bear with me. There's also one more thing we want to do. We don't want to include any other person's JavaScript, right? Or TypeScript. So for example, JavaScript or TypeScript that's hidden inside of our node module someone else wrote, we do not want to include those. So we're going to say, let's also exclude an array of objects. And the first one we want, and the only one we want right now, is node modules. We want to exclude node modules from being looked into by our TypeScript compiler. Save. This is our TypeScript configuration file. I'm going to take this tsconfig.json file and drag and drop it into your chat, right? So this is what I want you to do. So I want you to have. So again, in lesson 3, I can take my tsconfig.json file and just drag it across. And you should have that now that you can use, okay? Even if you couldn't type this fast enough or you didn't understand it, please use it. Now there's still an error. It says, if I hover over the error, it says JSON schema to the TypeScript compilers, no inputs are found, right? No inputs found means that there is no, we have no TypeScript, right? That's a problem. So let's convert. Let's take our server.js. Here's our server.js. And let's convert our server.js to a TS file. So again, I want to right click. And if you notice, the renaming is F2. We want to rename this to TypeScript. So server.ts. Okay, that's what TypeScript is. And immediately when we do that, we should start seeing some errors in a second. But in order for us to see the errors, notice that we see these errors, require. We see all these errors with require. It says require can be converted to an import. Okay, we're going to come and I'm going to show you this in a second, what it's going to look like. It's pretty neat, right? There's also request response. There's all these errors here, and it didn't have errors before, but suddenly we have errors. How do I transpile? How do I convert my TypeScript file to a JavaScript file? This is something that's important to do. You need to use Control, Shift, and B together. Control, Shift, B, right? So if I do Control, Shift, B, you can see that I have this little option that comes up. And it says there are two options here. I can either do a TypeScript watch task or a TypeScript build task. I want to use the TypeScript watch task, right? If I use the TypeScript watch task, it's going to kick off it's going to try and transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript, okay? So what this means is, if you look here, right, that it actually emitted or created a JavaScript object. Look over here. Here's our server.js like it was before. No changes. I haven't made any changes to it yet. But we have in our terminal, a brand new task, which is a watch task that's come up. So again, how did I do it? Control, Shift, and B. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second. And I'm going to ask you, are you with me? I didn't make any changes. All I did was convert last week's file from a server.js. I renamed it to server.ts. And then I pressed Control, Shift, B, which brought up my little task runner. And I just selected TSC watch. You just don't have any errors. Wait, Ivan, it's going to come. It's coming. Okay. Again, the requirement for you to have any kind of errors in your server.ts file, this is where you need them. In the server.js file, right? How do I convert what? It's converted already for you. So again, this is what you need. You need a tsconfig.json file, which I've given you. Okay, this is the first thing you need, right? The tsconfig.json file tells TypeScript how to convert from TypeScript to JavaScript. That's the first thing you need. You need a TypeScript file, right? So if I go to our server.ts, right, or our server.js and rename it to server.ts, you're going to see a bunch of errors, okay? Because TypeScript is trying to parse through your server.ts file to see if there's any errors. And like you can see, there's a bunch of errors, okay? Server.js, though, when we do our Control-Shift-B, should have 0 errors because our server.js is just emitted JavaScript. That's all it is. Okay, so far so good. Same thing we had last week. There's no changes. Same exact thing. So here's our server.ts. Here's our server.js. Two different things. Okay. Now, Node does not understand server.ts. It only understands server.js. So when I'm running things with Nodemon, so let's just rerun it with Nodemon here for a second. I'm just going to do it again. So if I go Nodemon only looks at server.js. It doesn't look at server.ts. Look, starting node server.js. This one, the one that's emitted, not this one, the one that I made, right? Okay, so how do I make this more modern? Why do I need this? Why am I complicating your lives? Well, let's rewrite this statement here from a const HTTP require. I don't have to use this method. If I click on this, Visual Studio Code will make a recommendation and say, convert require to import. Let's do that. Bam. And this is what it looks like now. It says HTTP. But I still have an error, even though I converted it. Why? First of all, let's take a look at the structure. Import something from something. This is the structure now that we use instead of require. Okay, this is the brand new Ecmascript. So Ecmascript module pattern. Okay, this is the new one that I talked about before, which is, right, instead of CommonJS, which is CJS, right? It's Ecmascript module pattern, right? And so the Ecmascript module pattern, which is the one we want to use, right, is ESM, or is the one we want to use, ESM, okay? Ecmascript module pattern, all right? And ESM makes more sense because we're importing from instead of requiring it, okay? But we have an error. And the reason why we have this error is because it doesn't understand what node is. It has no idea. You have to tell it what node is. So guess what we need to do? We need to install some additional modules as developer dependencies. Remember we talked about last week inside of our package.json. Last week we had dependencies, right, which is Mime types. But we could also have developer dependencies. Let's add some developer dependencies in here as well, okay? So again, dependencies means a third-party module that I need to use in order for my server to run. I need to use Mime because if I don't have Mime installed, then it won't work. It won't be able to look up the Mime type and everything else we had it do before, right? We need to have this module in here. That's a dependency, right? But what is a developer dependency? It's something that allows me to run my code, right, a little bit better without, but it's not required. If I don't have it, oh well, you know, it doesn't matter, right? That's a developer dependency. So let's add some developer dependencies so we can get some good code hinting in our server.ts file. This is how you do it. You want to go to your shell and you want to use the following command. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start putting commands in here. I want you to follow along, please. And I'm going to just focus on my package.json here to help me out. Okay, so you can see the differences in my package.json. Here we go. Yarn add at types / and the name of my dependency is going to be node and then -- dev for developer dependency. That is the yarn command. Okay, I'll type that in for you as well. So it's yarn add at types / right, node -- dev. That is the command that I want you to use now. Okay, and that command I'm also going to put up on YouTube so people have that same thing for the people that are watching. Okay, what did it do? It went out to the npm registry, downloaded and installed this new type definition for Node. That means all built-in modules for Node are now known to the TypeScript compiler. Before, TypeScript, because it's modular, had no knowledge of Node. So if I go back to my server.ts now, notice that the variable, the errors for HTTP as well as file system and even MIME types are gone. Okay, but not these ones. These ones are still something that is, well, makes no sense yet. Okay, we'll talk about this in a second. Let's convert the next one. So you can convert them all, but we'll convert them one at a time. Again, you can use your little light bulb here to convert required to import. It looks like this. Import file system from file system. Let's do the MIME type though. If I do this one, right, this works okay, but now it gives me a bit of an error. And the reason why it gives me a bit of an error is because, well, TypeScript has no idea what MIME types is. You need to add another helper module. Let's do it again down here. So for MIME types or for any other module, it's got to look like this. Yarn add at types, the name of the module. What's the name of the module? MIME types, and then -- dev for dev dependency, a developer dependency. If I did that, and I'll show you what that looks like on the chat, yarn add at types, MIME types, -- dev, and I add that in, you can see now I have no errors in this at all anymore, not here anymore. So errors are almost gone, right? And let me type that also here for people who are on YouTube, for watching on YouTube live. That is the new thing you want to add in. And what did this do to my package.json file? If I go to my package.json file, it's added a second developer dependency, all right, which is this one, okay? So, couple things to note. The version of your type definition file That's what this is. This is a type definition file. The version may be different than the version of your actual module that we've downloaded from the npm registry. Sometimes they're very close, like this. 2.11 is very close to 2.135. It's still 2.1 something, right? Sometimes they're a little farther away. What this means is because the type definitions for many JavaScript files out there, for example, if I wanted to add in Jquery, right, as one of my npm modules, let's add Jquery. We don't need Jquery, but let's add it in anyway, just as a test. I want to add Jquery. With Yarn, you would do something like this. Yarn add at, let's add Jquery first. Here's Jquery. With Jquery itself goes into the dependencies area. There's Jquery. If I want to give support for Jquery from a Dev Dependency perspective, so again, I typed in yarn add Jquery just by itself, right? If I wanted to add developer support for Jquery, which means good code hinting beyond what Visual Studio Code can give you, then what you can type in is yarn add at types, the name of the library, Jquery, and then --dev to put it in its right place, like so. Now you can see that there is a difference. Look, Jquery is supposed to be at 3.6, and yet our developer dependency, which is our type definition library, is slightly behind it at 3.5.14. So it has most features that are documented, but there might be some features that are not. What does this mean? It means that if I start using Jquery in Visual Studio Code, that there might be something that I'm missing that actually does exist in the latest version. Okay. Now, this is what happens. Remember, this is community supported, and Visual Studio Code, as well as all this other stuff, is happening so quickly. It's moving along so quickly at a rapid pace that this stuff is happening. By the way, I can also use my yarn for other things, which we're going to do today. For example, if I want to have Bootstrap support from a CSS front-end library, we're going to use that. Or if I wanted Font Awesome, I can use yarn to install Font Awesome in Bootstrap, and they might have nothing to do with Node.js. But maybe I want to use them in my client-side scripting. I could do that as well. For now, though, you can see that this is how it would work, right? And if I go back to my server.ts, the only thing that's missing now is this path. Path seems to have a problem. And let's see why path is giving me an issue. Well, remember that path, what that is? If I hover over path, it says path is either, take a look at this, either a string or undefined. How can path be undefined? Why is it possible? I want you to answer me this question, guys. This is a question for you guys out there, right? Why is path possibly undefined? It can be, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, right? And this is a great answer because take a look at request URL. Request URL, if I look to URL, it could be either string or it could be undefined, which means maybe I won't even get a URL. Okay, so what we're going to tell Jquery, TypeScript for us is we're going to say that we trust that we're going to get some string. We're going to get a string out of it. We're going to force it to be defined. And the way we can do that is we can say as string, which is a beautiful thing. If I did this, right? If I did this, then my type is going to be a string or false. Okay, this is interesting. So I want to do this idea, this as string here, but instead of doing it here, what if I did request URL as string up here? If I said, well, the request URL we're going to get, it's not going to be undefined. It's going to be even maybe an empty string. So we'll say as string up here. If I did that, no error. No error. Why? Because now the requested URL is string or undefined, but we're casting it as a string. So path is only a string. And since path is only a string and lookup requires a string, that's why it was complaining, right? Lookup requires a string, but we were giving it a URL or a string. That's a string or undefined, right? That's why it was complaining, and no longer, it's not complaining anymore. So now if I save, so far we have taken care of most of the errors. There's one more error if I scroll down, and that is this, content type. Mime type. Content type, Mime type, right? Why is that? Because Mime type is string or false, right? And content type requires only strings, right? That's all it can be. Mime type must be a string. So going back up here where we have Mime type, right? We want to cast this whole lookup as a string. So we're going to say everything is as a string. And if I was to do that now, and if I save, then my Mime type now is a string, right? Is a string. And if I scroll down, there's no more error. So why do we care about this? Because really, at the end of the day, there's no functionality improvement. Zero. But there's an improvement for us. There's an improvement because no matter what you look at now, if I hover over anything I want, anything, I get all kinds of information from anything I'm looking at. I get the return type more than I had before, and a lot more code hinting than what we had before. One thing I'm gonna tell you guys is that if we use TypeScript like this for Node, which is what we're gonna do next, right? We're gonna have happy lives from now until the end of semester. If you use JavaScript, there's gonna be errors that pop up that you're not even gonna understand. You're gonna go like, why is this error happening? And it's gonna be a little bit more difficult for use. However, I have to mention the positives and negatives at this point in time. Positive, TypeScript will be easier for you to get errors. Negative, there's overhead. I have to have a TypeScript tsconfig.json file. You must have this. And if you don't understand this stuff, which probably most of you may not, right? As an example, these are just configuration switches that turn things on. Some people may understand this, and I hope you do. You need this. The second thing is you need to transpile. If you forget to transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript, you're going to be like, it's not working. Why isn't it working, professor? Because you didn't transpile. You have to transpile, right? And we have to turn on transpilation using Control-Shift-B. That is something you need to remember. That's an extra step that you don't have right now. And they're burning down my house, of course. So it's always the case. They always cook upstairs, and they're going to cook something that's smoky. All right, so tsconfig.json is required, but the other thing that's really super required is your Control-Shift-B. You need to transpile. And what if this transpile task doesn't even work for you somehow, right? Well, there's always command line. Okay, so let's suppose our transpile task, which is this one, here's our transpile task, doesn't work. Let's just stop this task for a second. I'm just going to kill it. And I want to transpile manually. I can still do that, right? Because you guys have the TSC module, you can just type in TSC and press enter. And that will transpile everything for you, right? There it is. TSC does it as well. If you just put TSC enter. And if you want to make a watch task manually, you can do that too. You can just type in TSC-W, right? And that'll do the watch task. It'll do the watch task for you, right? Okay, so that's something that you can do whether or not you can make your watch task work, okay? Okay, so you're still having an error. So where are you having an error, Julianus? You need to tell me, because otherwise I can't help you. tsconfig. So in tsconfig, okay, what's your error? You're still getting an error here? How about errors everywhere else? My first line. Okay, so like up here, you're getting an error. You shouldn't. Make sure that everything is saved. Make sure you're transpiling, and then you're good to go. Okay. All right. So again, let's try and keep questions for later, because otherwise I won't be able to cover the stuff I want to cover with you guys, and it's critical, right? Like I said. So, but if you have a critical question, if it's not working for you, I clearly want to help. All right. All right. Next, what I want to do is put this up on GitHub. Let's do this. So I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added TypeScript support. That's all we did. We didn't do any changes. There's no functionality changes to this thing at all. Okay. So far, all we've done is taken our old Node server and converted it to TypeScript. That's all we've done. How do I make this into a Express server? How do I do that? Well, if I go back up online, we can go to our Express application, and you can see this is expressjs.com. If I go to getting started, And if you scroll down, it tells you have to install Express first. Okay, this is locally to my app. Yay! And under the Getting Started guide, right? You know, as an example, there's also a Hello World, and if you notice, Hello World has an example of a little, you know, program that looks like this. This is Hello World. This is a little server, similar to what we did here with our code under server.ts. But instead of writing all this heavy-duty code, let's replace it all now. We'll kill it, and we'll replace it with this code right here. I'm going to copy-paste this code for you inside of, and don't worry about the 4.18.1. Okay, I'm just going to copy it here. Okay, here's the copy-paste inside of your code. I'm also going to do the same thing on people who are watching on YouTube. This is the code that you need to use. Oh, I can't do that. It's too long. It doesn't like code. So yeah, so you won't be able to do it. I won't be able to copy. But this is the code that I want to use. I want to use that code that I found here on this page. This is the page that I found it. Okay. And first, I want to keep it as is. I want to use the old require. This is using CommonJS module pattern. I want to convert CommonJS module pattern to Ecmascript module pattern. Okay, and I want you guys to help me. That's what I want you guys to do. So first things first, I go back here and let's just kill everything here. Everything, all this stuff, guys. Let's just kill it all. All right, and just replace it with, not that. Let's replace it with all of this. Okay, so copy and paste. There we go. And, well, yes, I like it. Let's replace the curly braces. Let's put the curly braces back in. I like the curlies. That's the semicolons. I mean, that's kind of what I want. Okay. Do you need to use semicolons with JavaScript, guys? Yes or no? Is it a must? Do I need to use semicolons with JavaScript? Do I need to? Saeed says no, and you're absolutely correct. Should we? Should we use it? Yes, I agree with Julianus, 100%. If I'm a developer, I cannot but use curly braces. Do you need them? No. In my opinion, this is my opinion, I'm telling you, as a longtime developer, it feels weird for sure, and I definitely will use curly braces when I code. Semicolons when I code. All right? Next. So this is problems. I want to convert this from, again, I want to use module pattern. Remember the module pattern that we're going to change to. If I convert to an import, it looks like this, but it gives me an issue. Why is it giving me an issue? First things first. Why is it giving me an issue? I'm going to go back. This is review for you guys and a test. Why is it giving me an issue? Come on, guys. If you don't get this part.
Express is not installed.
Thank you, Shadow. You're awesome. All right, that's exactly the reason. Express is not installed. If you don't install Express, it'll mess up. And not just Express isn't installed, but also there's no code hinting. No code hinting. Let's do both. Okay, so let's go back to PowerShell and let's install Express. So we're going to say yarn add Express. Enter. Okay, that's the first command. Yarn add Express. Next command, right? After you do yarn add Express, what we want to do is we want to get some code hinting for Express. Even though we added Express in, and you can clearly see it on my package.json now, here it is, right? In my server.ts, it's still got an error because it doesn't know what it means. It says, could not find a declaration file. We need a type declaration file, so we're going to add it in. We're going to say yarn add at types and the name of the library, which is Express -- dev, so it's in the right spot. Enter. Now, what if you forgot -- dev? Then it's going to put it inside of your dependencies area. And I like to keep my developer dependencies separate. Okay, that's what I like to do. But if you forgot -- dev, if you didn't put this -- dev in here, then it would just put it up here. Okay, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to break anything. It just, well, it's not going to be as organized. Okay. So now we have Express here. This is a an actual dependency, and you can see that Express, the type definition library, is a little bit behind the latest version of Express, 4.18. Well, my developer, is 4.17, so it's slightly behind, but most functionality is going to be in here. We can kind of be confident with that. And if I go back to my server.ts, you can see clearly that there's no issue anymore. All right, nice. Next, well, we've converted everything, but we also have some additional things I want to talk about. So here's something. I have my Express server now. Here's my Express server. And I have this piece and I have this piece. Well, this piece we know what it is. This piece is a listener. We've seen this before with our Node.js, which is similar to server.listen that we used previous before, right? That's what we did, right? Port makes sense. Port is the same as we had before. But what about app? Well, app is instantiating an object of type express. That's what it does, right? So it creates an Express application. Express is huge. Express has a lot of functionality under the hood, more than just, thank you, Said, more than just me. When I instantiate this for the first time, notice I'm not using a new keyword here. I'm actually making a reference to an Express application. That's what this becomes. So this creates a new Express application. That's what it does, okay? And then we use .get. Okay, now, in order for you to understand this, you should have looked ahead and you should have done some reading and some work on our course shell to understand what this is. But I will politely guide you today with some stuff that I have here in my little PowerPoint. So I'm just going to script down. We did this installation process. Thank you very much. And we also use my first Express application, which is kind of looking like this. Yes, thank you very much. And we're going to keep going until we get to this thing called middleware. What the heck is middleware? Middleware literally means anything you put in the middle of one layer and another layer, right? So for example, I do a request by the server. It might go through some middleware function, a function that goes between the server request and the router, which is a handler. Okay, that's how it works. So that is what middleware is. It's a function that stands between one function or one request and another function. Okay, that's what it does. Some middleware function. All right. So there's different kinds of middleware. There's external middleware, and there's also Express middleware. Express middleware is built into Express. Okay. And this is what this is showing you. This is the request response cycle. It's something that gets executed in the middle, like in here. Okay. And remember what we talked about? We make a round trip. We make a request to the server, and we get a response, this round trip that we get back, right? And typically what we want to do is, I'm just going to fast forward here. It looks like this. We make an incoming request. We have some kind of middleware, right? And then we have this statement, response send, and it goes to the response object. So we have our request object. We have several pieces of middleware functions, basically, and it goes and creates a response object it's almost like composes a response object by going through several functions. That's how it works. Okay, this idea of an incoming request going through several pieces of middleware and creating a response is what you need to keep in mind with what's happening with Express. Why? Because there's several pieces of Express middleware built in. All right, let's talk about Express middleware a little bit. So there's application level middleware. Whenever I do an app.use, that's application level middleware. I'm using some kind of function. You're going to see me use that. There's router level middleware where I say router.use. Okay. There's built-in middleware, some functions that I'm going to kind of activate, if you will. And some of them are Express static, Express JSON, Express URL encoded. Those are built-in middleware functions. Right? It's not types. It's not type. Oh, it's at type. Oh, I know it is types. At types. Thank you. Sorry. Yarn add types. Yeah. And also error handling might look something like this. App use. So app use allows us to use a piece of middleware. Common middleware functions that you can download. So third-party middleware functions are the following. Body parser, we're going to see this, compression, connect flash, cookie parser, cores, debug, express session, helmet, mongoose, Morgan, passport, and serve favicon. Those are the majority of the functions we're going to be using this semester. And these are third-party middleware functions that we're going to access. okay, as well as some built-in functions. Let's talk about those built-in functions. Let's look at the application object really quickly. The application object uses a couple things. App.set, we're going to see this. App.set is used to set environment variables that are built into Express. There are certain environment variables that you can set. We'll see some of those being set up today, right? There's also app.get, which is used to get environment variables. If I want to get or set environment variables, this is something that I can use. I can specify an engine. The engine is usually some kind of view engine. Typically for us, we're going to have EJS as our view engine. Our view engine is going to set up how we're going to render or draw or compose our HTML. That's how it's going to be done, right? There's also app.use. Typically what app.use does is it attaches a piece of middleware to my application. So it's app and then whatever you want to do afterwards, some kind of verb, right? So app.use, whatever the path is, and we can do some kind of callback. Let's go back to our code for a second to talk about what that is. I'm going to do app.get. Remember, when I do get, it's getting some kind of environment variable. And what this environment variable is, when I do this, when I do app.get this, it's getting a route, a standard route. Remember, this thing is the default route for my application. And when I go to my default route, it's going to issue a res send. Going back to my this, a res send, right? Here's my res send. It's going to issue a res send, right? Which is going to send the response back to the browser. Okay? Don't be confused. I'm just telling you this is what it's going to do. So app.get, I'm listening for the main route, right? I pass in a request and response, and this is using fat arrow function type. We can use a callback, that's the old way, which might look like this. That might be something you might look at or remember. And remember that Visual Studio Code will actually ask you if you want to convert to an arrow function. We can always convert back. We can always get back to this, okay? But let's just put it like this for now so you can understand it better. Same thing with this one. This is just an empty function, okay? This is what this is. If you're not happy or comfortable with arrow functions, this is what your application would look like, okay? This is your application. And you can see that hello world, which should be hello comma world, right, is what it looks like. Okay, cool. So this is what I want you to put in exactly inside of your server.ts, please. And then make sure it's transpiling. So Control-Shift-B to make sure you're transpiling, and use the watch task, please, not the build task. Build task only does it once. Watch task waits and for any changes. So let's use TSC watch. Then it converts everything, it compiles everything, and there's no errors. It says found 0 errors, and it converts it to a server.js file. Here's my server.js file with some extra stuff at the top, right, which you don't understand, and I don't even understand, and also some other stuff here, all right, some other stuff that it's done here. You can see that it's using Ecmascript module pattern, okay? You need to use server.ts to use this module pattern for Node.js and Express, okay? You cannot use regular JavaScript, right, to do it this way, okay? It won't work properly, okay? Well, you can, but it's not going to work the same. All right, and it won't give you good code hinting. For example, I'm getting great code hinting now on all these things, right? I can get an understanding of every little piece that I'm looking at. I can inspect anything by hovering, which is an amazing option for you guys. An amazing, amazing option, okay? All right, so that's the first thing. And let's test it with our NPM, our Nodemon, right? So I'm just gonna do that again. Let's type in Nodemon, and you can see again, it works nicely. And if I go back out to my website for my site, which is this one, and if I press refresh, it's gonna say hello world, right? That is kind of similar to what I did before, but now I'm using Express. And it can read anything else that I have built into it, and so on. And that is my little Express site. So my site becomes very interesting. Here's something that I don't care about anymore. I don't care about MIME types. Express takes care of it for me. I don't care about that stuff, right? Express does a lot of the heavy lifting for me because it is packed with information. It's packed full with stuff compared to what I had before with Node. So could we build everything with Node? Yes, we could. Should we build everything with Node? Probably not a great idea because Node is bare bones. We have to build everything from scratch. So it's better for us to use Express. Here's something else that we can do to make our lives even easier, but it takes some configuration, okay? It's the Express generator. But before we get there, let's put this up on GitHub so we can have a record of this one. So git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say converted server to Express, and git push. There we go. So you have records of everything. You have all of our steps here. If you look back at our code online, so if I go up to our Centennial College and refresh now, and if I go to my lesson 3, you can see that certainly I have my latest version of my server, which is right here. But what if I wanted to see the version before? Well, I can always go back. So let's go back to code. I can always go back and take a look at my commit. You can see that these are the commits that I have. And where I went to added TypeScript support, if I want to go back there 17 minutes ago, I can click on this, view commit details. That tells you what has been changed. Nice. And I can also browse files, right, for that commit. Here's my commit. For that commit, if I look at lesson 3, and if I look at my server.ts, you can clearly see that is my previous version when I converted to TypeScript. You can do all of this online, and that's why we use Git and GitHub. It's really great for this stuff because what it does, it allows us to view stuff, the changes we did. We can always revert back to this code if we're not happy with what we did in our new code. All right, but we don't want this. We want the new stuff. That's our new stuff. We converted a server to Express. Now, what I want to point to you is, and this is, I'm going lickety fast here, right, which is pretty fast compared to what I normally do on the videos that I have online. What I have also is up here in the Express.js website, you have the Express generator, and it talks about how to use it. So the Express generator, you need to install it, and it needs to be installed on a global scale. Let's do the global installation now, right? So again, when we do global installations, personally, I like to do them in a command prompt, like so. You don't have to, but I do. And the way I do it is something like this. I say, and I use for global installations, I use npm. I do not use yarn. I do something like this. npm install, and then it's express-generator -g. That is the command. Okay, I'll type that in for you. And again, go to a command prompt or terminal if you're a Mac user, another terminal, and type that in. npm install express-generator -g. That is the one I want you to install. Okay? And when you do that, there's some issues with this. We're going to talk about the issues. So it's going to go out, grab this, and it's going to say, there's 3 vulnerabilities. Do you want to fix them? Do not fix them. Okay, we're going to fix them manually. All right? So that's one. The other thing is that although they recommend the Express generator right here in the site, the Express generator, needs to be updated. Okay, so we're going to update it manually. Okay, here's something that we can use when we use the Express generator. We can use the keyword Express now by itself, and we can specify the type of engine support we want to use. Remember this idea of model, view, and controller, a separation of concerns that we talk about in the course shell, right? I'm just going to draw it here with my annotations really quickly so you can understand what I'm talking about. Model view controller is a design pattern, all right? Normally, what we have is some kind of view. So this view here is what the client sees, the view, right? And a view is typically a front end page. It could be an HTML page, right, or whatever. Or sometimes if you're programming and you're making an Android application, it could be your screen. The paradigm that I'm talking about right now, it's not web specific. It can work for anything you want. So a view is just something that I'm going to display to the client, okay? That's typically what I'm going to do. The client being me, all right, or the user, if you will. All right, let's change the color. So we'll go to the thing. Then there's some kind of logic behind the view, right? And that logic behind the view is usually called the controller, right? It's just a name, a friendly name for a class, or code, if you will. And this is the logic behind the view. We'll call this logic, right? Or we can also call it an algorithm or code, whatever you want. And that is, it sits here, okay? I'm gonna talk about this. And finally, there's something called a model, right? This is typically, again, what we have. So a model. And the model, I'm just gonna put it over here as another layer, right? And again, you might have seen this in a different way before because everyone, well, you might see different sources that talk about it differently. Here's a model, right? And the model kind of is, we can also think about it as a class or other logic that connects to our database or our data store. Usually something that a class that works with data. Sometimes we also put our schema here, which is kind of like our database information, but it's usually something that connects to data. That's what it does, okay? So view, it's just a web page. And how does it work? Well, what we do is we send a request. So the user typically sits, let me make another little box here, and we'll make another color. Yeah, there we go. So here's our user, and our user goes to the computer, and they go to a website, right? And the user basically makes a request to the view. And what it does is the user makes this request. It maybe does some kind of input, right? So here's some input. It says something like, I want to see this page. That's input, right? The page, you know, that I'm on a page or a browser, I kind of make input into the view. The view, in order for it to give the user what they want, right? What does it do? It makes a request, right? It makes a request to the controller, right? So again, here, this is where it requests information, requests data, right? Some kind of data. That's what the view does, right? Give me some data, controller. The controller doesn't have the data, but it knows it has methods that it's going to use, right? To return the data, it's going to communicate with the model, right? So the controller makes a request from the model. So, and a lot of times what we say is it manipulates, right, the model. So sometimes we might connect with a database or whatever, and the database might be up here. Okay, and I'm pointing this little out for you because, again, guys, what's going to happen a lot of times is, you know, you have the database container out here, right? So this is, we'll call this the database. So here's the database, right? And so the model connects to the database somehow through logic, right? And what it does, it returns data from the database, and it goes back into the controller. And from the controller, that information goes to the view, it updates the view, and then from there, it goes back to the user, and the user gets the information that they want. These layers, all right, the way I've drawn them, they might be represented in a triangle sometimes, right, where you have model, view, and controller in a different scenario. I think it's easier for you guys to think of it like this, right, where the user makes a request of the view makes a request of the controller talks to the model, which talks to the database, and you can see that this is a round trip, this whole idea. So if I was going to fill in the left side here, so here we get, you know, request data. So the, you know, connects to the database, connects to database. This is what this part is here. Again, I'm spending time doing this because you're going to have questions, and a lot of this will answer your questions. Okay, so out here it returns data, And by the way, when we connect to the database, we also make a query a lot of times, query, right? That's also connects and queries the database for information, right? Returns data back through the model. You know, it returns data, passes data to the controller, passes data to the controller, right? The controller might format the data, right? And as the data is formatted, it passes from the controller to the view, and the view displays the data. That's how it works, All right, so that's the kind of the full trip, if you will, from one side to the other. This idea where we have model, view, and controller is a pattern. It's a design pattern. Do I have to, kind of design everything this way? No, I do not. Should I? It separates our concerns. I can put someone to create our views, a front end, kind of designer. I can have someone else to create our logic behind the view, to wire up the view and make it work properly. I can have someone who's maybe a database administrator or someone who's really great at back end to work with the model and connect to the database, right? So you can separate your concerns. You can have you can do a division of labor where I can kind of set up different people doing different things on a larger project. And what we want to do, what we're concerned with, is all of these pieces for this semester. What this does, what Express does. So why did I tell you all this? Because what Express does is it has something called a view engine. Oops. It has something called a view engine. And the view engine, I'm just going to stop annotating here for a second, right? The view engine, which is right here, there are different ones. You can use EJS, you can use handlebars, you can use Pug, and a bunch of other ones, okay? We care about something called EJS. EJS is a view engine. It creates or composes the view. So that means that when we use Express, we don't have actual web pages that are there. We don't have an index.html anymore. What we have instead is an EJS file. That's what we have. And the EJS file it takes the information that's in there like a template, and it creates the HTML file in real time for you. That's what it does. It creates the HTML. So there's a layer between what we type in the EJS file and what's being created on the page. We call this composition or generation, okay? That's kind of an important thing to do. So we generate the page. So EJS generates the page, okay, the HTML page. Okay, so there is no solid HTML. It gets generated, right? So we need an engine for this, and we need to specify what that is. When we set up an Express, kind of a site, we need to specify the engine, okay? If we do not, then we don't have an engine. Okay, this is an important thing. So notice that minus V, it says minus view with an engine, adds a view engine support. You can add view engine for EJS and so on. That's what it does, right? But so too, you can specify adds EJS support right here by just doing a -E. So when we install Express, we're going to say Express -E and the name of our project. But we already have a project, you're going to say. And the answer is yes, we do. We do have a project already. We do, right? What happens if we use Express -E on an existing project? It's destructive, my friends. It's destructive. What it does is it overwrites certain things. It overwrites our server, it overwrites our stuff, and we don't want that to happen. But we do want support. What the Express generator does is it creates a project structure that looks like, just a second, I'm just going to stop annotating again. It looks like this. It creates all this stuff. It creates a my app. Let's suppose if you were going to do something like that looks like this. So Express, we want to have the Pug view engine. We don't. We want to use EJS, but this one is using Pug because this is the example. My app is the name of the folder. It creates my app, and then it creates a bunch of other stuff inside of it. It creates a folder structure that to some degree is useful, but we're going to change it to a great degree, a lot. We're going to change it a lot here, okay? And we need to also not just install dependencies, but we also need to install, we also have to convert it to TypeScript, which is a bit of some work to do, right? And that's where we're going to stop today. We're going to create a very simple Express app, very simple, and convert it to TypeScript. That's what we're going to do for the next 45 minutes. Sorry, I'm going to run over time here, but I'm going to continue to record just in case you need this. So I'm explaining this because, guys, it's coming, right? And I need to do this. Even if you read this stuff online on the course shell, it may not explain it exactly this way. That's why we have these live sessions here. Okay, let's clear this annotation and get to work. Let's actually do it now at this point. Because it's one thing to talk and another thing to do. Let's just do it. So let's go back to this. We want to use the express generator, but we know it's going to be destructive if we use it in here, right? So I'm going to save my package.json, okay? I'm going to stop Nodemon. Please stop Nodemon. It's important. Okay, don't let Nodemon go. Clear it up. We're stop Nodemon, okay? We're also going to stop any watch task for now. So Control-C, stop the watch task, all right? Please do it. You can also delete it like this. This is another way. We want to stop all tasks, okay? Because we're doing something destructive. Next, let's rename our package.json to package.json.old. Please do that, all right? So the way to do that is press F2 or right-click rename, and we'll, kind of change this to package.json.old, right? Because we don't want this thing to go. We need some of this stuff. We need some of this stuff, all right? Like, for example, our name and the description and the version and other stuff. We're going to see that it's going to give us some of it, but we also want new stuff, all right? tsconfig.json, we're not going to change because that's going to be there for us. Server.ts and server.js, well, that's the old stuff, but we don't care about it. We can actually delete it all because it's going to make it all for us. Let's delete it, everything, right? It's going to make it all for us, right? Our content, data, and node modules, we can all leave that in place. That's no problem. That's all good to go, right? And now what we want to do is we want to use express, and we want to do -e. So here inside of our code, let's try this out, see what happens. Inside of here, right, we want to do something like this. We're going to say express, right, and then -e, and then press enter. It's going to say, warning, are you sure? Destination is not empty because it's destructive. It's destructive. It'll destroy and create new objects in here, and we need to be aware of that, okay? I'm going to say, yes, continue, and press enter. And it created a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff, all right? Notice it also made its own package.json. So this is where you and I are going to make some modifications, right? I'm going to pull up both package.json and package.json.old side by side. And the way to do that is in Visual Studio Code. If you go to the right-hand side, there is this split editor on the right. See it? And I can split so I have the left side and the right side. I use this little key right here, split editor. Well, I want to look on the right. I want to look at this. So I click on the right, and then I click package.json.old. And you can see on the right, I have my old package.json. And on the left, I have my new package.json. But we have some issues that we want to take care of. One, the name. That's not right. It should be this. So let's copy paste from this to this, right? The version. Well, we're not going to copy paste that because it's just version 1. We'll make this version 0.2 because it's the second version of our server. Description, that is missing. Let's put that in. So copy that one from the right, and underneath version, we'll put that in. There's our description, right? Main, we don't have. Okay, we don't have that. I'd like to keep main as server.js. So let's copy main, author, and license. These three things, main, author, and license. Let's copy these three things and put them under description. So again, under description, put them in. Private is true. We can leave that. It's no problem. We have a scripts, and it says this is our startup script, node./bin www. This is difficult to understand. So we're going to move this around. We're not going to say start node www. Instead, what we want is to start node at server.js. That's what we want. Okay. Nice. We have some dependencies: cookie parser, debug, EJS, express, HTTP errors, and Morgan. Take a look that express is actually old, right? Express that we have locally is 4.18.1. Express that we were asked to download is about 4.16.1. Also, I want you to notice something else. I want you to notice the tilde before the version of the module we're getting, compared to this one, which is a caret. The caret, which is this kind of like little hat, right, means anything that's greater than or equal to 4.18.1. Okay, that's what that means. Whereas tilde means that this is what we want. This is where we want it. We don't want anything but this. This is a specific version. Okay, we don't want this. We don't want tilde. We want this, and we want the latest version. Well, we've already installed the latest version because we went to Node modules and we have Express. It's right here, right? Remember? We installed Express and used it right here. So it doesn't make sense for us to reuse something else. We want to use the latest version of Express. So let's do that. So let's grab this version of Express here from Dependencies and put it inside of here, like so. Okay, 4.18.1. We also have some dev dependencies that we installed. Let's install those. All right, so we'll put these dev dependencies, we'll put them down in here. So, comma, as we reform, and here, this is what our package.json looks like so far. So we notice that we have Node, we have Express, Jquery, and Mime types, but we don't have Jquery installed here. We know we're probably going to use Jquery, so let's just include that too. So we'll take Jquery, and I want to keep it in alphabetical order, Hij, so it should be about right here, Jquery. Mime types we have, but we're going to remove it. But look, for now, let's put it in. So we'll say Mime types, and it's under A, B, C, D, E, F, G, AI, right? A, E, I, O, right? So that is definitely before O, like this, Mime types. Okay, so we have all those. Everything we have here from here is now in here, and then some. So now we don't need to use our package.json.old anymore. We have it there. It was just there for us to get going with. And everything we had from here is now in here, but we need to do some upgrading as well. Okay. We need to do some upgrading as well. All right, good. So excellent. We don't need to see this anymore, so we can close the right side down, and we can save this package.json packages, and then I'll give it to you. So now what I want to do is I want to install new versions, right? I want to install new versions of debug, of EJS, because Express has the latest version, that's good. But debug and EJS and cookie parser and all this stuff, it doesn't have it, right? We know it's not there. So instead of doing it like this, right? So here's the stuff we need. We'll make a list, okay? I'm going to put Notepad up. And we need the latest version of stuff. We need, I'm just going to take this as a list here. So this is my list of modules. And I'm showing this to you because we want the latest versions, right? So this is what we want, but this is what we want latest versions of these, but we have the old versions here. Let's get rid of, we're not going to have EJS, debug, or cookie parser here. Trust me. We just want our stuff that we had before, right? So we can get rid of Morgan and HTTP errors, and this is the stuff we had before, right? But what we want all of this stuff. We want everything else. We want cookie parser. We want debug. We don't need Express because we got that already. We don't need Mime types or Jquery. So these are the modules we need. We need these things. Don't worry about the dependencies. We just need these modules. I'm just making a list. That's what I'm doing here with my Notepad. So I need cookie parser, debug, EJS, HTTP errors, and Morgan. Let's add them in. And we're going to do this all in one blow. What I mean by that is we're going to type them all at once. We're going to say yarn add, right? And let's start with the first one, cookie parser. So cookie parser, right? And then debug, and then EJS, and then HTTP errors, and finally Morgan. Those are the ones. So that's the line. I grab this line here, copy paste for you guys. Now again, I'm assuming that you deleted it from your package.json and saved it, just like I did. And if I go here and press enter, it's going to grab the latest versions and add them in, my friends. Now, take a look at the latest versions and compare them with the versions that were going to be installed. 1.44, the newest is 1.46. Debug is 2.69. The latest is 4.34. Huge difference. EJS was 2.61. The latest is 3.18. Right? HTTP is 1.63. Now it's 2.0. And Morgan was 1.91, and now it's 1.10. So guys, everything is new, right? That's why we did it. That's why we did it. All right, and we don't need to save this anymore. Let's put all the type definition files in place so that way we got good TypeScript support. The type definition files for all this stuff now. All right, let's do it. So it looks like this. Yarn add at types. Let's see if you guys can think of it as well. Cookie parser space at types slash debug at types slash EJS at types slash HTTP errors at types slash Morgan, and then minus dev at the end. That is the command. It's a bit big, but if you think about it, what I'm doing is I'm just adding all the type definition libraries for all of the dependencies. So if I type enter here, so if I go here and type enter, then it's going to add all of them into the dev dependencies. Notice that the dev dependencies are here and the dependencies are here. Difference between dependencies and dev dependencies. I'm going to ask you this question next week. You should be able to answer me. What is the difference between a dependency and a dev dependency? A dependency is stuff you need in your project, and a dev dependencies is nice to have in your project, right? Which is stuff to help us as developers. Notice that all the at types are in the dev dependency section, where the dependencies have all the modules, the actual modules we're going to use. All right, guys, this is awesome. So we've got our package.json here, and it's now complete for today. All right. Now, there's one thing we need to do. We need to remove MIME types. How do I remove a package? Let's remove it. Yarn remove, right? If I type that in, you can see that it says, warning, there's not enough arguments. I need to specify what do I want to remove. I can say yarn remove and MIME types, because we don't need MIME types anymore, right? And I also want to remove at types. Actually, let's just do one thing at a time. Let's just do MIME types. If I do that, you can see that it removes it from node modules, and it also removes it from my dependencies. And I can do the same thing. I can say yarn remove at types slash, and then the name of my module minus dev, which means it'll remove it from the dev dependency section. Okay. And if I press enter, it's going to remove those two. All right. So again, to add, you click add, but to remove, it would be like this: yarn remove, and then it would be MIME types, and then yarn remove at types MIME types, right? And then minus dev to remove from the dev dependency section. Okay. Nice. Okay, excellent. We've got our project. Now we have another issue before we move on. I'm going to give you this package.json so that you have it. So there's our package.json new. This is the new one. I'm going to pass it into you guys so you have it. There it is, right? So worst case scenario, you can always replace your package.json with my package.json. Now, guys, I'm going to run overtime, like I said. So if you can't stick around, it's totally cool. I'm going to keep recording for everybody so you see the total new version of what I'm doing now, okay? Next. We have our project, but we have this bin folder. What the heck? What is this bin folder we speak of? Well, bin has something called www. And www, my friends, is our server. But it's called www. And it makes no sense for you and I. So we're not going to use www. We're going to take this www file and drag and drop it outside of the bin out here. Right? And we're going to rename this thing with F2. We're going to rename it to server.js. Hey, there's our server.js. We're actually going to change it to TS in a second. But first, we're going to try it this way, server.js. Notice where it's going to go. It's going to go into our app folder, right? Our app folder. Here's our app.js. That's what it's going to go to. This should be renamed. So if in your server.js, inside of the require line, which is line 7, if it shows / something else other than app, please change it to this. Okay? Nice. Server.js. tsconfig.json is complaining because there is no TypeScript yet. We're going to make it soon. We also have a public folder, and we have routes, and we have scripts, and we have views. Views came from them. Scripts came from us. Routes, and we have public. How do I fit my stuff into this stuff? Well, public is their idea of where we want to have public files for the client side. So what I want is where we have our content, and we have our data, and we have our scripts. We want those 3 things inside of our public folder. So let's take our content, put it in public, please. We have our data, put that in public. It's kind of useless for now, but whatever, right? We have our scripts. Let's put that inside of public. Okay. And so far, so good. We need to get rid of, we need to get rid of images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. Let's do that. So images, JavaScripts, and style sheets, we need to delete those. We don't need them. Delete. Because our JavaScript is our content app.css, and our that's our CSS, and our JavaScript is in our app.js instead of our scripts folder. Okay? I'm still restructuring. Now, go into your index.ejs file, guys. In my index.ejs file, notice that this is an EJS file. It is not an HTML file like our index.html. This one was our index.html. Notice the difference. Let's do a split view. Here's our index.html, and on the left, here's our index.ejs file. It's almost identical, except for it's pointing at the wrong spots. It's pointing inside of our style sheets. We got rid of that, and it's doing some of this business, right? I want to copy our index.html file, please, everything, and type it or paste it underneath my index.ejs file here. Okay? And I want to use this left than %equals title %greater than. I want to copy that and put it in our title area instead of COMP229, please. So that's going to go here. And our H1 title, we don't need. I don't need that one. I don't need a welcome to the title. I don't need that part either. I do need this part where it says /content app.css. But remember where we are. We're inside of our index.ejs page, right? And I want to go inside of my public and inside of content. This is correct for now, and so is this, but I'll explain why in a second. Okay? The rest, all this other stuff up here, you can delete. Goodbye. Okay, and this is our new EJS file. Okay, it looks like HTML, but it's not HTML. It's EJS. It's going to be turned into HTML later on. At this stage, we can get rid of our index.html file. We don't need it anymore. Goodbye. Delete. Okay. Let me give you my index.ejs file now, the way I have it. Okay, so let's go into my index.ejs file, and that's inside views, inside of index.ejs, and I'm going to grab you and give you that file. Please take that index.ejs file and replace the one you have. Or type the, do what I did, if you can. Nice. Excellent. Now, our server.js is there. Our index.ejs is here. But there's some issues. I don't want my public routes and views to be lowercase, like p, like lowercase p, right? And my bin folder is useless. Let's get rid of my bin folder. Goodbye, bin. Delete. So no more bin. And then let's rename our public folder. We'll rename it to ppublic, capital P. Guys, you need to do it now in Windows. This is a problem. If you don't rename it now and you rename it later, Windows doesn't care about upper and lower case. It's not case sensitive like a Linux is. okay, or Mac, please make sure you use a public P for your public folder, as well as a capital R, right, for your routes, and a capital V for your views. Now we need to fix some of this stuff, and I'll talk about where to fix it. So I've renamed public routes and views with capital V, capital V. Okay. So server.js, it looks at our app. App.js is here. There's a second part, and it has all of this. Oh my God, look at all these vars. We have to get rid of them. We will in a second. Bear with me, right? But here's something that you need to have. On line 7 and 8 of your app.js, you need to make sure that it's ./routes with a capital R, right? /index, ./routes with a capital R /users, okay? And on line 13, where it says our views, the path to join is a directory name with views. This views path has to be capital V, views, okay, on line 13, because we've changed the name of our views folder to a capital V. Same thing with line 20. Line 20, we want to change this to a capital P for public. Okay, save. So far, these are just our changes. And if I scroll down, there's nothing else we need to change. Okay, so that's it for our file. I'm going to give you my app.js, not the app. There's two of them. There's an app.js inside of our public scripts app.js, right? And there's another one now. There's another new one, which is inside of our root, which is app.js, this one, okay? I'm going to give you this one now, and this one, yours, should match mine. Please make sure it does before we make any other changes here, because we're going to make more changes, all right? And I want to talk about these changes with you. So again, I'm going to my lesson 3, and in my root, I have app.js. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to give this to you. Yes, you can go. Shadow, I'm recording this class. It's on the course shell. If you have another class, guys, and need to go, see you later. If you don't, it's okay. I'm going to continue going, and I'll give you everything you need to help you. It's on YouTube as well. Yes. Take care, Shadow. Thank you. File structure. So the file structure would look like this now. Let's take a look. It looks like this. I'm just going to open them up for you so you can see everything. This is what the file structure looks like. Okay, and of course there's node modules. All right, so this is so far so good. We've got everything. Let's test it as is. Okay, let's test it as is. Let's not kill ourselves making changes first before we check what it does by itself without any TypeScript yet. Let's do it. So again, control backtick. I'm going to type Nodemon, and if there's any errors, it'll come up. So far, no errors. It says node server.js. It's running. We're good to go. And let's check it out on our page. So here, I can go to localhost 3000 and press refresh. And now we can see hello world. And it also does this piece again. Take a look. All that stuff is good to go. Isn't that wonderful? I think so. And why is this amazing? Well, it's amazing because it did everything that I did with my server last week, plus more stuff that you don't see yet, okay? So that's excellent. So now that we've got this hello world here, it's functioning as it should. Let me just close up these things here for a second as we continue. And notice public routes and views, they changed back. Look at that. Look how they changed back to lowercase p, lowercase r, lowercase v, right? I didn't mean to do that. How did it change like this? And how did it continue working, right? Windows is a funny creature is the answer, right? So let's stop this insanity. Let's open it up in my, my desktop. And this is a key thing, guys. If you don't get this right, it's not going to work properly, right? So here in lesson 3, you can see that they're lowercase, public, routes, views. I want to close off my my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to stop Nodemon here, close off my Visual Studio Code, and change things here in my folder structure to make sure that they are renamed with the proper names. So public with a capital P needs to do that, right? Notice how I changed back. I went to lowercase p afterwards without my control. The reason why is because Windows does not care. Even if I change this to a capital P, capital R, capital V, it keeps it lowercase. That's awesome if you did that. If yours didn't change back to capitals or to lowercase, that's awesome. But you can see clearly that mine did not follow suit, right? This happens with some people. And it happens because of a couple reasons. One, it happens because of OneDrive, our little beautiful friend, which is also a bit of an enemy. Let's kill OneDrive. If you have OneDrive working, first quit OneDrive, guys. Super important to do that. Close it off, right? You shouldn't have OneDrive working. Now, we don't have any OneDrive anymore. If I refresh, you can see that there's no more status. Let's see if we can do the same thing. If I can go back here now and change this to P public, right? Still, it doesn't seem to like it, right? Why is that? Because, well, Windows doesn't care. If I make a new public folder, let's try this out. If I try and do this, so if I right-click on my folder structure somewhere, and I wanted to make a public folder, public, as an example, with the same name but capital, it would not accept it because capital P and lowercase p for Windows is exactly the same. Right? So if I tried doing that, if I said new folder, and I tried to make it a public folder, capital P, it's going to say, nope, you don't want that. What do you want to do? Do you want to merge this one with this one? Because you already have a folder that's named public, capital, public, right? It's really important to understand that. That notion is what we want to try and do. Okay, super important. Let's bring this back into lesson 3. Let's bring that back into Visual Studio Code. And guys, it happens for many people when they start off. They have this issue and they try and put their stuff up on Heroku or some kind of Linux box, and it doesn't work. And the reason why is because this says routes and this says lowercase r for routes. Even if I tried to rename it here, routes, it accepts it here in Visual Studio Code, right? And let's say I renamed it here, rename it to views, and rename this to public, rename public, capital P. And I put this up on GitHub. Let's do that. So clear git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say completed basic site structure. Git push. You can see that I'm doing this now. It's pushing up to GitHub. On GitHub, what do I see? Let's see what I see on GitHub. That's important. And we'll refresh. We'll go into our lesson 3. And notice public, routes, and views, lowercase. Key. This is really important. Even though I want to, kind of do this and change it, what if I did it the other way around? What if I change the names of my public folder here? Can I do that? What can I do on GitHub? Can I go up here on GitHub and change the name of my public folder? Is that something that I can do? The answer is no, you can't, right? So, I mean, if I can add files, I can change files, I can delete my directory, I can do that on GitHub, right? I can go to a file, but I can't really change the name of something, not here, right? So, I can't go to GitHub and modify stuff right here, right? It's not possible. But notice what I did. Even though here it's public, roots, and views, it was capitals, now it's lowercase again. So to simplify, I wanted to show you this because to simplify, either go with all caps from the very beginning or all lowercase. It's up to you, but please stick with one. And make sure that everything inside here matches, because Windows, guys, has a problem. Sometimes it does what it does to me, and I don't want that to happen to you. So here inside of my app.js, we're going to change this to lowercase r because it won't be compatible on Linux boxes. Lowercase v and lowercase p again, because online sometimes we do these changes and it doesn't work. Okay. However, somehow it did accept when we first made our content and scripts caps. I can't change them back because they are what they are. So that's how it is. Let's save our files here for whatever, the way it is. And now that I've done that, let's kick off OneDrive again, just to make sure that I have all my saving stuff. Sometimes, OneDrive helps us. Sometimes it does not, right? But I'm making it come back up again just for us. And let's relaunch Nodemon just to make sure everything works as is, like we had before, because otherwise bad things will happen to good people. We want to think about things working, and then they don't. Looks like it works again. We're all good to go. All lowercase now as opposed to all uppercase before, right? I'm going to stick with lowercase this semester, I guess. And then what I want to do now is start converting back to TypeScript. So one thing to convert to TypeScript, we need to start converting our server.js to a server.ts, our app.js to a app.ts, and inside of our routes, we have two more files. We have a users.js and an index.js. They also need to be converted to TS. Let's start with our server. So rename to server.ts, rename to a app.ts, right? Rename to users.ts, which is going to be useless for now. Not 2s, TS, guys. TS, Tom. Oh my God. I can't even type. It's terrible, terrible world. All right, and then here the same thing with this one. Let's just rename this to a TS. You'll see the reasons in a second. Well, in a few minutes. All right, so those are all been renamed nicely. TS, 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 but they haven't been transpiled. Let's transpile everything. Control-Shift-B. Control-Shift-B transpiles. We'll do the watch task. And it transpiles everything into a JavaScript. It's going to take a second to do because it's going to start all of them. It's going to convert all of these to JavaScript files. So now we have, it looks like double the amount of files plus a map file, right? But that's okay because we have TS files and JS files. I will, kind of steer you to our node, and if I go here and run it, it still runs, even though there's a bunch of errors on the TypeScript. There's still a pile of good things that are happening. So Vincent says, why is there an error? Okay, let's take a look at your error, Vincent. And before I move on, I will take a look at your error, because remember, I don't have what you have. Let's take a look and see what this looks like for you. There's your screenshot. Let's take a look and see what mine looks like, your little screenshot. Why do you have an error? Let's see. Well, yeah, we have this error because this is a warning for compiler options. That's what this is, not an error. It's a warning. And if it's a warning because it's pointing out that Ecmascript 2022 may not be, if you hover over, it might say something like it's not compatible with what you're doing with your with stuff. It might recommend, instead of Ecmascript 2022, go back to Ecmascript 2021. But the reason why this might be happening is because of your version of TypeScript that's been installed, as well as your Node version that you have on your machine. Okay, we'll hang tight and we'll try and fix it later. All right, let's go back to this. So we know this is working, but we have errors in our Visual Studio Code. We want to get rid of them. How do we do that? Right, so I go back to my server.ts. Let's start with that one. So first of all, we never ever want this pattern, right? The var stuff. We don't want requires here, right? We want to convert to a module pattern, all right? But remember, the module pattern that we have here is different than what we had before. So we want to use import. Let's try it. So I want to say import app. Here's what it's going to look like from, and then ./app. That's what we want to do. But however, if I was to do that and change it up, so it looks like this, it's going to give us an error. And the reason why it's going to give us an error is it says it's not a module. Look, it's not a module. The reason why it's not a module is in our app.ts, we have at the bottom module.exports. That's what it says. We don't want to use this. We want to say that export default, export dot default, the default module is app. That's what we want to say. If we said export default app, that is what we need to do to make our new, that's the new version of exporting modules. Okay, so going back to server.ts now, you can see that that is solved. That's not an issue anymore. Okay. Next, let's do the next one. So I want to import, right? Instead of var, we want to use the import kind of stuff. And it's not giving us an option to change because of our lovely var. Var is like preventing this from happening. But we'll just type it. So import debug from debug, right? And what we want to say is we're going to say something like debug, and we're going to pass in lesson 3 server. That's what we want in there. So debug lesson 3 server, and we can get rid of this line. Okay. The next one, HTTP. We know this one. This is our basic node module. So if I kind of type this and I go to the little light bulb, we can, it says extract to constant in enclosing scope, extract to function in module scope. Well, we don't want these. We want import HTTP. We'll rewrite it. Import HTTP from HTTP. That's what it's going to look like. Okay, nice. And that is our first set of data. We do have an error that comes down here. As we move to val, it says val is an error. And the reason why val is an error, so far we've gotten rid of these ones. We do have vars here. This should not be a var. It should be a const. Let's change the var to a const for this one. Same thing with server. Server should be a const, right? We don't use vars in our course. We never do. So that's gone. We can get rid of some of these comments for now. Okay. I will talk about what these are later on for you in another video, right? And so we have val, right? So what is val? Where are we getting the val value? That's what this is, right? It says that val is of type any, but we didn't specifically say what type it is, right? That's the parameter that we're getting for our normalized port, right? And that normalized port function, notice we're passing in a environment port, which is undefined or a string, or 3000, one of those two things. The process environment port, which is a string or undefined, or 3000, that's what we're passing in. That's where we're passing into normalized port, and that's why it says any, right? So we want to explicitly say either any. If I said this was a string, right? If I say this is a string, that's okay. That'll fix it because that's the type that I want. So I can have to specify the type in my in this little custom function we're using. We don't need this comment. I'm just going to get rid of some of these comments so we can make this easier to look at. We'll add our own. And this one here is also another problem, right? So it says error. It doesn't know what error is. It has an implicit any type, right? That's what the error is. And what we want to give it is a type. For example, HTTP errors is what we want to make it. So we can import HTTP errors from here. Let's try that. So we can say import HTTP errors, right, from HTTP errors. We know we added that module in earlier, and we're just importing this HTTP error module so we can use it. Then down in here, we can say, well, this is some kind of error. It's an HTTP error, if you really want to put it. So that's the one it is, HTTP error. That's what it is, right? So what type of HTTP error is it? Okay. If I said this, that's not going to work. So it's definitely an HTTP error, but what type of HTTP error is it? It's definitely an error type. Okay, so it's an error event. It could be an error event. It could be an error callback, right? But it's something. What if it was an error event? Would that solve the problem? Well, if it was an error event, it says that syscall does not exist on type error event. Okay. I'm just putting it out there to you because that's why TypeScript is complaining. It doesn't know what that is, right? So one thing to note is we can type it like this, but we can also use something funny. We know it's an HTTP error, but we haven't really asked for what it is. So really it's like an HTTP error is what I want. So if we change line 11 to read something that looks like this, what this structure looks like, which is different than this structure up here, is I want to import one function. It's called HTTP error or class from this module. If I did this now, and if I did that this is an HTTP error type, let's try this. HTTP error, now it computes. We're good to go. I'm just restructuring. This var, right, which is of type string, it either should be a let or a const. That's what this should be. All right, so we want to get rid of the vars. If you see vars in your code, if I miss something, guys, later on, please change it to a let. Let. And down in here where it says address.port, because address can either be a address info or null, because that's what server address gives you, right? So again, what this is waiting for, it says object is possibly null, right? So that's what server address is, because it gets either a string, address info, or null, right? Then there's a couple things. We can say, well, it's never going to be null. We can do that. We can say that this is either a string. So because all we care about is we want to bind the type of address. If it's exactly equal to string, we want to bind it. So we're going to say as string. If we did that, it changes everything, but then address and port don't compute because port is never a string, right? So how do we fix it? Well, we know that address itself gives us either a string or address info. Can we do that? Can we say it's as a string or it's address info? Can we do that? Is that possible? And again, if we did this, then we have something that looks like this, where string or address info doesn't compute for a port. So let's undo that. Okay. Again, what we're trying to do is get rid of our errors. Let's make it a string. I like the string idea, but we'll change some of this stuff down here. We'll say that bind, instead of it being a string like this, we'll just change this to shorten it a little bit, okay? And what I want to say is we'll take away the port, right? And we'll say something like this. We'll say that bind, let's bind this, where pipe plus address is what we're binding. And that'll do it for us. That's going to debug, that's listing on port, whatever it's going to be. All right. And if you don't like this, you can always change this to port, but that's okay. All right, so that took care of all of our errors. And I want to pass you the server.ts file now, right? Server string address info work for you? That's awesome. Didn't work for me. So let's bring that up. So I'm going to pass in that thing. So on a desktop, this is my version. If I go to here and if I go to here, oops, I'm going to give you my server.ts and then you can transpile. Okay, so that's good. Let's go to app.ts. Let's do the same thing for my app here. So I need to convert these to imports. So again, it'd be really nice if we can just do this and say, now what if I did extract constant and enclosing scope? Well, it kind of looks weird. It's not what we want. So if you try this, that's not what we want, okay? So we want to do the same thing. We want to do import, create error, from. Okay, that's all it's going to be. And then import, let's just change these to imports for a second. So import, 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 and I'm going to import these ones too. Okay, those are all imports, but instead of require, we're going to say from. So these are going to be gone. Froms, from, and we get rid of these extra brackets. Okay. So those are okay. This is not okay. And again, this is from, and this is from. But the problem that it's giving us errors is because these are not modules. We're going to make the modules in a second. For now, leave these errors as is. All I did was just rename. I just kind of copy pasted Anson. That's all I did here. Okay. Var cannot be var. Let's make this const. Okay. It's got to be const. No vars. Vars are not allowed in our code. Okay. I'm going to move down. So to figure these errors out, I'm going to leave these two for now. Okay. And I'm just going to move down to this little part here. So this requires a little bit more massaging, right? And the reason why it requires more massaging is because it is outside of, just a moment here, while I make sure I check my notes, and I don't want to give you the wrong things. What I want is for error to go like this. I want to say the type of error is create error dot, and it's HTTP error. We had this before. In my request, it's going to be an express, right, dot request. And my response is going to be an express dot response. And my next is going to be a next function. Next function. That's what those are going to be. And that fixes the problem. Okay. So that mostly all the errors are gone at this point. Okay, for my app. The only apps that I have, the only problem I have is this, but my app is actually going to work correctly. Bear with me while I fix this last part up. I'm going to go now into my index.ts. So the problem with my index.ts is the same problem that I had before. I can't do module exports. It needs to be export default router. That's the first piece. So save that part, okay? And the same thing for users. It's export default router, okay? That's the command, export default router. If I go back to my app.ts now, you can see that that doesn't make, there's no more errors here. And so now, my friends, this is the version of my app.ts that I want you guys to use. So here it is. There's my app.ts. Okay. Let's fix up my routes for index and users, and then we're done. Index, how do I fix this up? Well, these are express request, an express response, and a next function. That's what those are. Let's fix that up. So it's going to be the same thing. This is going to be an express dot request. There it is. This is what I want in there. And the reason why it's not working is because these are vars. We need to change those to import statements. If I go import express from express, and if I do import router from, actually, that's incorrect. What I meant to do is const router is equal to express router. Now everything will compute. I was just getting carried away with express. Okay. I think that's express dot next function. Yep. Okay, so that's that. I need basically the exact same thing for my users.ts, but let me tell you this. I really don't need user.ts at all. So in my app.ts, let's just remove it. So where it says my index and I got users, let's get rid of users. We're not going to use user right now. So let's get rid of it, which means we also need to get rid of it on line 22. Let's get rid of that too. So no more user, which means we can get rid of those 3 files here. Delete. Okay. So now let me update. Let me give you an update. So here is my updated version of my app.ts. There it is again. And here is my updated routes index.ts. Sorry, do it from the command line. I got to do it from here. There we go. Okay. And now we should run it again and see if it all works. So you can see that it's working. Node server.js is working. And if I go back up to my code, which is here, and refresh, we're still good. There it is. So now we're all good to go. And that, my friends, is us converting completely to TypeScript. And we have a modern version of our files, which is all, this is the express generator that we use to convert our file. The last change I want to do is I want to get rid of my package.json.old because I don't need it anymore. So let's just delete it. So I have nothing in my folder structure that is not useful anymore. Everything is good. Let's put this up on GitHub. So again, and then you'll have everything you need. So git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say converted project to TypeScript. Git push. And that's everything. And that, my friends, is your starting. I would recommend that is your starting for what we're going to do next week. And that's also going to be your starter for what you should use for your assignment 1. This one right here. This is your starter, right? The stuff that we're going to be using for lesson 3. If you package everything together and if you watch the videos, the only thing you need to change is the routing. And we're going to talk about routing, well, more next week, right? Any questions before we stop for the day? Because I've gone about half an hour over, which I estimated that I would do. Maybe you have questions, but maybe you want to ask some questions afterwards. I'm going to stop recording now, and so we can just download this. Yeah, you can download this to start off. That's why I gave it to you. I wanted to build it with you so you saw what I did, but you can certainly go to my GitHub repository. So this is my GitHub repository for lesson 3. You can grab this repository, right, as an example, and you can use this as a good start. Allah says, I see everything start to be complicated. I know. It looks like it's complicated, but actually it's not really complicated. What it really is I'm complicating to simplify. I don't know if that makes any sense. I know, Julianus, it's a lot. And the problem is it's your foundation that you guys are struggling with as well. Because we're doing a lot of stuff that you haven't had a chance to look at before, right? But the great thing is the more you play with this stuff, here's my recommendations. The more you play with it, the better you're going to get at it. All right. There is no other better way to do it. Right. Now, here's also a question that I got to answer. Oh, sorry, JP. Do we need to add what we did now to our GitHub repository? I recommend it. Yeah, I recommend that. Yeah. So why am I going through this? Why am I showing you all this stuff? Because there's a hell of a lot of stuff that I've talked about tonight or today, right? And the reason for this is because, well, one thing is once you have everything structured in more or less this way, right? Then we're ready to go with next week. Why? Because our server.ts is structured correctly. There's no more vars anywhere in our files, number one, right? And the second thing is, we're using imports instead of requires, which is the way to go. for everything that we're doing from now on, right? Julianus is asking, we need to do this every time we are going to build a new server. Well, for us, we're just going to carry on. We're just going to iterate. We're going to take this stuff and we're going to add to it. Okay, we're not going to build anything new from here. All right, we might restructure our code again to create a model view controller structure. We might do that, right? But we're not going to create a brand new server every single time. This is the server we're going to use. We're going to base everything from this foundation right here. Okay, but we're going to pay for it. We paid for it today, right? We paid for it in overhead. We paid for it. It's a one-time cost that we're going to pay for. I would recommend start your assignment from this code right here. Remember that the stuff that I've given to you guys on the course shell, if you look in the course shell, right, which is up here. Let's go to the course shell. So this course shell, all these videos, they're a little old, right? They're from May of, the fall of 2020, right? So they're a couple years old, right? Now they're still good, but they're using JavaScript native. There's no TypeScript in any of this stuff, right? So when you look at some of the stuff that I'm doing, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work. It just means that it's going to be a little different. Okay, last bit. The last bit I want to do for today, I swear. The Heroku piece, now that I'm looking at this, it needs to be done, right? How do I do Heroku now with TypeScript and everything else? Well, Heroku has gone through some changes. So Heroku, you need to sign up for an account for Heroku, right? So please sign up. If you don't sign up for an account, it says there's a problem with my account. The reason why it says there's a problem with your login is you need to redo stuff. Heroku was hacked recently, right? And what you need to do is set up your account from scratch. If you already have a Heroku account, you gotta kind of set it up for new. So what I'm gonna do is off screen here, I'm gonna see if I can fix it. I may not be able to. And I may need to create a whole new account. Let's see. I'm recording still, don't worry. I haven't stopped. I was gonna stop recording, but I didn't. So let's see if I got Heroku. Okay. And I'm just trying to, I just want to look at thing. Close it off. Okay. And I think I can get in now. Let's try it. So sorry. It was just, I had to re-log in and I had to change. So there it is. There's Heroku. You have to sign up for it. I want to make a brand new app for Heroku. And I need to make a new app name. So I'm going to call it COMP229, right? And it's going to be in the summer 2022 semester. And I'm going to make it so this is everything for you for section 1. I'll do another one for section 2, right? Next week. So there's section 1. And section 1 will be for me. So anything I add in there will be me. You can see that I can choose United States or Europe. I'm obviously going to choose United States, which is closer, and create my app. Awesome. So now I have 3 options for me to connect to my app, to put it up, right? I have Heroku Git, GitHub, or Container Registry. I want to click GitHub, but GitHub has been having some issues. It says connect to GitHub. I need to reconnect to it because, like I said, they got hacked, guys. And it says where it says item cannot be retrieved, internal server error. They've been hacked. This is something that's happened to them. So it doesn't like this anymore when I want to try and do it. I'm going to see if I can fix it offline again. Because again, I have an older account and my account works probably different than yours. So let's see if I could fix GitHub. It may not be fixable this way. Again, just FYI. And if it's not fixable, it is what it is. Yeah. This might be the same. I don't know if you guys are getting the same issue, but for me, I got an issue and I got an error because of what we've been doing. Let's see if I can do this. It says registered authorizations Heroku CLI. And I wonder if I need to change something with the thing. I don't think I can do it right now. I'm going to have to work on this later on, guys. I'm so sorry, but things have changed with Heroku. It used to be a much easier setup, and the reason why is because they got hacked. So let's talk Heroku one more time and go into that new thing I just made, COMP229 M2022 section 1. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It is what it is. So I'm just going to go to deploy for a second. And what does it tell me to do here? It says connect this app, connect to GitHub. Yeah. I'm going to have to do the direct way. So Heroku Git for now. And I'm not sure if there's a quick fix. I may have to Google this later on. I'll come up with an addendum to this video later on. But what I can do is I can use Heroku CLI. So Heroku CLI is a direct way of connecting to Heroku as opposed to going through GitHub. So this is a change from the videos. And this is a problem for some people as well. So if I do Heroku login, what's it say? I gotta install it. Hold on a second here. Let's download and install the Heroku CLI. I may have to do this again. Fit installer for Windows. I've done this before, but I wonder why. Again, I think it's because they got hacked. I'm so sorry, guys, but unfortunately, what's happening with this one is they need to do this because what's happened is their whole server got hacked, and as a result, I have to turn this off for a second while we're doing this. As a result, they've had to add additional things, right? Protections. And that's why it's causing issues. I'm surprised that it's so crazy. And that's a lot of files that it's adding in. I'm curious why. There was a simpler process before. This is the way. Mac OS with curl. Oh, we could have done it this way too. Okay, so we should have the Heroku command available. Let's try it now. Heroku. Excellent. And what about our node? Good. Didn't mess this up. And let's bring this back in. And let's try this out. So I'm just using the Heroku tool belt. So I'm going to say Heroku login. Press any key to open up the browser to log in. Okay, good. Log in. and that's it. And then you can close this off, right? If I close it off and go back, I'm logged in. See, I'm logged in as me. And then I should be able to do the commands. So the command to use Heroku from the command line, let's go back to my little app because I got to find that again. COMP229 M2022 is this one. The command you have to follow is this one. So you're going to do, we initialized, we want to add a Heroku. We want to push our object to Heroku, but we need to add a remote. And this is the remote that we're going to add. Get remote, add this Heroku, right? So that's what we need. So I'm going to grab this line here. I'm going to go back here and put that in, press enter. It's going to add that in. So we've got a remote now, right? And we should say, get push Heroku main is what it should be. If I do a git branch, you can see that there's a main branch. And if I do git push Heroku to main, then it should work. And then once I've done that, it's like me pushing to GitHub. But instead of me pushing to GitHub to, remotely, I'm pushing to Heroku. And it tells you that there's an issue. If there's an issue, it says building the Heroku 20 stack, determining which build pack to use. No default language can be detected. This occurs when Heroku cannot detect the build pack to use this application. Push failed, push rejected, and why? Well, it didn't know what to do. This is new. I love this. This is great because this is like not how it worked before at all. Okay. Excellent. I think we have to modify our package.json to talk about our engines. Let's talk about that first. Let's see if I can do that. So if I do engines, and in here we'll talk about npm and node. And what's our current engine? 18. And npm, what's our version of npm? 18.1 or 8.1.0. And what's our version of yarn? We need all that stuff. Yarn. 1.22.18. Okay, let's see if this makes sense. And let's try it again. It may fail again. Okay. Same version of the code has already been built. We have detected you triggered a build from source code, blah, 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 with a different branch. Uncommon cause behavior is attempted to deploy code from a different branch. If you're developing a branch, deploying to via Git, you must run git push Heroku branch name main. Okay. I don't think it's doing it. I think it's going to give us the same error. Yeah. So that's not the same thing. Why? What does it give us on Heroku itself? Refresh. Sometimes what happens is you get a bit more information on here. Git push Heroku master. Interesting. Choose a pipeline. It totally worked. Let me just check my notes. And if it doesn't work again, I will update you. This is all new. So that's what happens when we, it's a wonderful day when we have to work hard to make things work with Heroku. Okay, got all those. Start is correct. And I didn't even put in engines and it worked. But it doesn't detect the language is what it said. Same version of this code's already been built. So I'm not going to. Main to main, remote rejected error, failed to push references to this. What was our last failure? It said building, no default language can be detected. No default language can be detected for this app. Let's look that up. Since you guys are here, let's just do it together. Okay. One, push rejected. Heroku has set a default build packs used when it needs to detect the language for your app. In order to detect it, runs the bin detect commands, not in a subfolder. Huh. I do have a package.json right here. It's not in a subfolder. Okay. And what? I put it in there. Huh. Interesting. The backend project was pushed to GitHub as a separate project. Pending files, client server. Maybe there is some pending files. Do I have pending files? I don't think so. I do. Which one is it? What's pending? Oh, okay. That goes to GitHub. That went to GitHub. And then want to do the same thing. Git push Heroku main. Find deploy. Push rejected. No default language can be detected. Hence, this occurs after detected build pack for use. Okay, let's go to this. It's clearly not working the way it is up here. Let's see if there's another hint of what we can do. Build packs, officially supported build packs. Okay, we know it's Node.js, Heroku Node, Heroku build pack set, Heroku Node.js. Okay, no problem. No, it's not what I wanted. I wanted to grab this line, copy it, and paste it. Git push Heroku main. Okay. Now why? Application not supported by Heroku Node.js build pack. The Heroku Node.js build pack is set on the application, but was unable to detect a Node.js codebase. Huh. Why? Node.js app is required on. Am I in another folder? Like the heck? Am I? I'm in lesson 3. Here's my package.json. JS, server.js. Okay. Server.js. It's right here. App.js. It's really weird. Are you guys getting the same thing? We tried to do the Heroku is for building live, Julianus. That's what it is. And we need it for next class, yeah. But it's really weird for a couple reasons. Normally it's very straightforward. But I'm having some issues. I'm going to have to probably record another little thing here because What does it tell us? What did it tell us it needed? It said error application not supported. Using build pack Heroku Node.js. App not compatible with build pack. Build packs Heroku Node. Building on Heroku 20 stack. Okay. Yeah, I think it's best. I think we should stop because I understand what the problem is then. I do understand. The problem that we're having is that it's trying to see the Git repository from a main perspective, right? So what's happened is because I have a combined Git repository, this is why it's failing. So up on Heroku, what I need to create is a Heroku live site structure. So Heroku doesn't like where you have multiple files, folders in a thing. So I'm actually giving it all of them: lesson 1, lesson 2, and lesson 3. That's what it's telling me, I think. And I think what I need to do is I need a separate live site structure. So under this, let's make a brand new live site folder. Hear me out. We're just going to call this Heroku live site. No joke. I'll make it like this. And my Heroku live site is going to be a duplicate of everything that I have in my section 1, lesson 3. So all of this. So copy. And let's make sure I'm out of Visual Studio Code for a second. And yeah, for sure. This is it. And if I go to here, I want all that in there. It's going to take a second, but it's okay. So it's almost like for me to go live, I need to have a separate file folder. That's why I'm being dumb. It happens to everybody, to the best of us, like they say. And what I can do is with my node, I'm being dumb. Yeah, for sure I was. Yeah, I can drag in Heroku live site. And what this is going to do is if I did this here, so if I said something like Heroku login and login, thank you. Then if I do the same thing, if I do git init, git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say initial commit because it's a new GitHub repository or Git repository. And if I do the commands on Heroku, which are Heroku git remote, this one. And if I did the git push Heroku, is it master? What's my branch? Git branch master. Okay, git push Heroku master, then that should be better. Let's see if it's better. Yep. Yep, this is how it should work. This is what it should have done in the first place. And I was struggling to figure it out, but I know what it is now. All right, so now that I've got this is the new site right here. This is the section 1 site. And if I go back up to test this out, you're going to see that method not allowed. I love it. Woo! I love having these issues. Why? Well, it did it, but did it do it? Let's see. Refresh. Did I deploy? Did it work? Let's go to deploy. Let's go to activity for this one. So it says right now, build succeeded. And let's move on my build log. Here's my build log. Process types is none. Launching. What method did I try to use? Build pack is web. Okay. Interesting. They use Node. And what about my logs? Let's go to my logs, view logs. Okay, so it said release, starting process command npm start. Good. It did this. We started this piece, Node server. And let's look at the web. What other issues did I have? npm start, state change from starting to up. Yes, there is. Yeah. There is alternatives, but I'm trying to make it, this is the easiest thing to use. Oh, I see what it did. I see what I did. Hold on a second. Deploy, access, activity. Here it is. View build log. I meant to do this one. I'll be okay. I meant to do this one. There we go. And if I do Control-Shift-J, we should even have access to our JSON data. Yeah, it works. All right, that's a roundabout way of doing it. So let me explain what I did and why it failed. So one, deploying directly from GitHub for me right now, maybe not for you, but for me is definitely not happening. So typically what we do is we go to Heroku, and when we make an app for the first time, so if I go to deploy, I typically choose GitHub, and it says connect to GitHub. But the problem with mine is when I try and connect to GitHub, I have an error. And if I click there, it says internal server error. It's trying to connect to something that it exists. It's trying to detect me as GitHub, and I have to fix that problem. That's my issue. But typically I would do this one. The backup version is what I did. When I went to Heroku Git, I downloaded the CLI, which is for Heroku. I logged in with my Heroku account and directly pushed to Heroku. But the proviso is, okay, just letting you know, the proviso is that you need to have a separate site that has nothing to do with, you can't have multiple folders. Right now, what I did before with our section 1 is I had multiple folders, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. That's not good because your main package.json, and actually all the Stack Overflow and everything was telling me the same thing. I was just ignoring it. But Heroku Live Site needs to be in one repository. So when you do your, when you deploy to Heroku or someplace else, you need to have your package.json as well as everything in the root of your folders, not the way that I had it before, which was inside of lesson 3. That will never work, right? Because that is, it's a subfolder. We can't use a subfolder. We need to have everything in the main root, which is what I had to do by creating a separate folder. At the end of the day, it worked, but not the most elegant solution. And what I'm going to do for you guys is next time we get together, which is next week, I'm going to have a fix for this because this is not, like you said, Julianus, can we use something else? So can we use something easier than this? There are other solutions, and I'm going to make sure that we have something else. But for now, this would be the backup version if you can't make the direct connection between you and Heroku. Okay, I'm going to figure it out, and when I come back next week, I'll have a solution, like I said. Otherwise, I think we should stop. We've gone for like, what, 3 hours now instead of 2 hours, and I think it's way over what we should have done. But I wanted to go through it with you to show you the problems, go through there, connect, and go through everything. And hopefully you guys got that most part. The majority of what I wanted to do today was what we did with Express, which was here in lesson 3. All right, this part here. If you guys got this piece and you made everything work, locally with your local server, then we're really happy at this point. I'm happy that you can make it work locally. The remote stuff with Heroku, I'm going to fix. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now and take any questions you might have locally. Thank you for the people watching on YouTube and your patience. Thank you so much. So any questions for anybody locally now?